Chapter 235. Right now there are two possibilities. The first is that Han Lilin's humiliation turns into anger. He already knows that we took the account book, so it's very likely that he'll kill everyone to silence them. The second is that he can't bear to kill them all, so he'll transfer those who are more outstanding. No matter which choice it is, there will definitely be many people who will die. So we have to think of a way to save them. Xiao Qing sorted out her emotions and said very calmly. She calmly started to plan. Of course we have too few people. If we go to save them we will all die. So I think we should lure the guards here and let those who are willing to run away. As for those who are unwilling to leave, we can't do anything. The others nodded. At least they had tried their best. They couldn't do anything to those who were suspicious and didn't want to run away. Fu Jingma, you stay here and hide well. The rest of you come with me. Xiao Qing handed a gun to Fu Jingma after she finished speaking. This gun was Yan Hanqing's stock. Although it was a less lethal pistol, as long as Fu Jingma didn't run around it should be enough to protect himself. Fu Jingma didn't say anything. He took the gun and found a place to hide. After Xiao Qing and the others prepared, they went directly to the secret base. Qiu Tang should be able to stop Han Lilin and the others for a while. During this time Xiao Qing and the others would have a chance to save the people. Xiao Qing observed last time. There were two teams of guards, about 30 people, and their strength was between level 2 and level 3. Although Xiao Qing's team was small in number, they were all elites. If they operated properly, saving those people would be a piece of cake. After Xiao Qing and the others arrived at the secret base, they became careful. There were machine guns outside the base. There was a team patrolling outside and another team patrolling inside. In general, the security was quite tight. Xiao Qing carried Little Bun on her back, and Little Bun carried Yi Yao on his back. The family of 3 squatted in the grass and observed. Xiao Tong covered them with a layer of spiritual shield. This shield could isolate the sense of breath. Whether it was mutant animals, zombies, or humans, even if they were close, they could not sense their breath. However, it could not block direct observation. After all, this was a protective shield and not an invisible shield, so they could still be seen with the naked eye. A group of people approached the base cautiously. Their time was limited, so they had to end the battle quickly. After they were infinitely close to the base, the first one to rush out was Dummy Air. He jumped up and directly rushed into the crowd. What would happen if a zombie sneaked into a group of people? Those people must have panicked first. Although they were all paranormals and were not afraid of being infected, their nature still made them panic. Once the patrol team was in chaos, Gu Panpan and Yin Qiue surrounded them from both sides. Xiao Qing also released her vines. Only Xiao Qing followed Xiao Tong. Her task was to protect Xiao Qing and Little Bun, and control the overall situation. In short, Xiao Tong was like a brick. She would move wherever she was needed. In other words, she would use her spiritual power to fill the gap wherever it was needed. Don't show mercy. Just kill them. Xiao Qing said coldly. This group of people helped the tyrant and did such a wicked thing for Han Lilin. Even death could not wipe out their crimes. Besides, they must have killed a lot of people. The piles of bones in the pit could prove that. Therefore, there was no need to show mercy to them. Killing them was a good thing for the people. The others also understood this very well. None of them showed any mercy, especially Gu Panpan. Those who dared to confront her directly were all smashed into meat patties with a single slap of her hand. Chapter 236. She wasn't called King Kong Barbie for nothing. Strength paranormals were very powerful in the early days of the apocalypse. A strength paranormals could crush dozens of nature paranormals, who could only throw small fireballs or water droplets. However, as the apocalypse progressed, paranormals leveled up one after another. Nature paranormals began to show their fangs, while strength paranormals became the weakest among the paranormals. Even if you have a lot of strength, it's useless. Nature ability users can easily block your attacks with an earth wall. Especially those long-range ability users, they just need to roll up their sleeves and stand there, constantly shooting fireballs and so on. They'll exhaust you to death. However, Gu Panpan was different. As long as the paranormals of the same level weren't as unpredictable as Xiao Qing, Yan Hanqing's ability was special, and Yin Qiue's ability was especially powerful. She could crush several of them. In her eyes, they were all brittle and easy to crush. Well, she was still the weakest among Xiaoqing's subordinates. However, when facing outsiders, Gu Panpan was very powerful. She would flatten those who didn't like her, crush those who dared to clamor, and kick those who didn't like her. Yan Qiwa looked even more ferocious. Because of his ability, if he used too much strength, he would crush people directly. His flesh and blood splattered everywhere. He looked even more ferocious than Gu Panpan. In comparison, Xiaoqing was more gentle. She was in charge of tying those people up and then air dye would kill them. When she attacked, she used her spiritual power to cover the entire battlefield. That way, no sound or smell could be transmitted outside, and the people inside wouldn't know. After killing the patrol team, Air Dai and Gu Panpan dug out the paranormal's energy. Although their levels weren't high, and it was useless for Xiaoqing and the others, Air Dai and Little Bun could still use it. After disposing of the corpses, Xiaoqing and the others swaggered in. The second patrol team was leaning against the door or squatting on the ground smoking. They laughed while smoking. Come on, let's place our bets. How long can they block old dad? I think he can last 10 minutes at most. Another person laughed. You think too highly of this old man. I think he'll last 5 minutes at most. I don't think he can last 3 minutes. Someone immediately laughed. While they were laughing, they saw Xiaoqing and the others swagger in. They were very arrogant. One of them stood up and said, "Hey, what are you doing here? Old Lu and the others are lazy? Why did you let them in?" "We are here to collect a debt." Gu Panpan giggled. Her appearance was a bit strange. She was clearly a delicate and pretty young girl with a bit of baby fat on her face. Her chubby face was especially cute, but the muscles on her body were so swollen that they almost burst through her shirt. Collect a debt? Before the man could finish his words, Gu Panpan punched him in the head. Gu Panpan's fist landed on his face. He didn't even have time to scream before his head was smashed into the ground. His legs were still twitching. But with Gu Panpan's strength, he was afraid that he had already gone to pray to God. The others finally reacted. They shouted and rushed forward. Fireballs, wind blades, vines, and earth shields were all thrown at them. Gu Panpan took a step forward and struck a beautiful pose. Any ability that landed on her, no matter what it was, immediately dissipated. Not even a white mark was left behind. The only thing that didn't dissipate was a vine. The vine wrapped around Gu Panpan's arm. She waved her hand casually and broke the vine. Chapter 237. The boy was helpless. His leg was broken, and there was no medicine to treat it, so it was inflamed and suppurated. It was very painful to move. He couldn't even crawl out, let alone walk. The girl stopped talking and kept dragging the boy. She also wanted to drag the young woman, but no one moved. She had a high fever when she was a child. Later she was treated in time, but her brain was still damaged, so her IQ was lower than that of ordinary children. She used to be loved by her family, but after Doomsday her family was ruined, and she was also caught. It was the boy and the young woman who had been protecting her. In order to protect her, the boy broke one of his legs, and the young woman was in a state of high fever. Although she was stupid, she was sincere. How could she abandon them? Xiaoqing commanded calmly, "Panpan, you carry the big sister. Air Dai, you carry the boy." Then Xiaoqing handed the little bun to Xiaotong and picked up the little girl. "Let's go. Let's go before they come." They all nodded, carried the people they should carry, and left. When they left, Han Lilin had already rushed over with his people. Xiaoqing asked Xiaotong to open a spirit shield, and then left from the side with the people. There was a mountain close to the secret base, and Han Lilin would definitely send people to search around. What she needed to do was to hide until the reinforcements arrived in the capital. That would be enough. Although she had 3 burdens with her, as long as there was no accident, it would be no problem to hide until the reinforcements arrived in the capital. Xiaoqing didn't say anything, and led the people up the mountain. It was the best place to hide on the mountain. Whether it was the complexity of the terrain or the obstacles of the road and trees, it was advantageous for Xiaoqing and the others. Besides, there were many plants on the mountain. If something happened, it would be much easier for them to escape with Xiaoqing, who was a wood paranormal. As soon as they went up the mountain, Xiaotong immediately spread her spirit power and began to search along a straight line for the most suitable place to hide. After a few minutes she determined a direction. Without hesitation, Xiaoqing took her men and followed Xiaotong forward. The mountain road was extremely rugged. The few mutants were fine, but Fu Jingma couldn't keep up with their speed. Among the remaining people, only Yan Qiue didn't bring anyone. However, Yan Qiue knew Fu Jingma's feelings for Xiaoqing. How could she be willing to carry him? Hence, Yan Qiue carried Fu Jingma and walked forward like a child. She grabbed Fu Jingma's belt and dragged him all the way up. When they reached a difficult place, she would change her position and use her arms to hold him. By the time they reached their destination, Fu Jingma's face was already as white as a sheet of paper. He almost vomited all over the ground. What appeared in front of them was a mountain wall. Vines grew on the mountain wall, covering it very tightly. When the vines were lifted, a dark cave entrance was revealed. This was the hiding place that Xiaotong had found. After they entered the cave, Xiaotong spread out her spirit power to cover the entrance of the cave. In this way, as long as the vines weren't lifted, no one would be able to find this place. The cave was quite shallow, but it was very dark. In order not to expose themselves, they didn't light any torches. They sat together, and the whole cave was very quiet. Xiaoqing put down the girl on her back, took out a lantern grass and stuck it on the mountain wall. It would take some time for Han Lilin's men to find this place. She could take advantage of this time to check on the injuries of these people. Among the three of them, the one with the heaviest injuries wasn't the young woman, nor was it the young girl. Instead, it was the young man with a broken leg. His leg was now twisted like a fried dough twist. Xiaoqing gently poked at it and saw the young man twitch in pain. Chapter 238. Xiaotong's spiritual power was limited, and there were level 4 superpower people in the area she needed to block. Therefore, she could only focus on one thing, which was perception. She had to give up on blocking sound. Therefore, they had to be quiet. If they made any noise and were discovered, they would be surrounded immediately. Fortunately, everyone in the cave knew the big picture and knew what was going on. They were all very nervous. Even the young woman who was in a coma had her mouth covered by the girl, for fear that her cough would attract the people outside. The few of them waited quietly, not daring to make a sound. After a long time, they all thought that the person had left, but suddenly light footsteps approached, accompanied by a voice, "Have you searched here?" Another voice said, "Not yet. It's all mountain walls. What's there to look for? Do you think they can hide in the mountains?" "You're right," the person agreed, then turned and prepared to leave. Xiaoqing and the others breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly a crisp sound was heard. It was not loud, but it attracted the attention of the people outside. He looked back at the vines on the mountain wall and murmured, "Am I hallucinating?" Then, he reached out his hand and lifted the vines. As soon as the vines were lifted, the dark entrance of the cave was revealed in front of him. "There's a question here." Before he could finish, a cold light flashed. He immediately covered his throat, but blood still leaked out from between his fingers. "What's wrong?" The people in the same team as him heard the sound and rushed over. As soon as they arrived, they saw the man fall on his back. Blood flowed out like a fountain. He was shocked and scared. When he was about to call for help, Xiaoqing had already come out of the cave. She held a dagger in one hand and threw it out. The dagger nailed into the man's forehead. The dagger went a few inches into his brain, and the man died immediately. Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief, but she also knew that it was impossible for a small team to only have these two people. Dummy and Yan Qiue also came out and went out with her. When they met people, they quietly killed them, and all the corpses were buried in the grass. Xiaoqing only brought them back to the cave after they killed all the people who were searching nearby. Fu Jingma was sitting there, blaming himself because he was the one who made the sound. Previously, Xiaoqing had given him a gun, and he had been hiding it on his body. Just now, unfortunately, the gun had fallen out of his body and landed on the ground. The noise it made attracted the people outside. There was a saying that there was no story without coincidences. Fu Jingma was extremely coincidental. Therefore, Fu Jingma blamed himself. Xiaoqing didn't have time to blame him. This place would be exposed soon. Han Lilin must have sent the teams back to report every once in a while. If the team here didn't report back, Han Lilin would definitely send people to check, and they might be exposed. Xiao Qing still carried one person on her back. She led them to the top of the mountain. When they went up, Xiao Tong had been using her psychic power to explore. She avoided those who could be avoided, and let air dye kill those who couldn't. They went all the way up steadily. When they reached the middle of the mountain, the atmosphere changed. Han Lilin must have found that the number of people was gradually decreasing. He learned to be smarter and didn't dare to spread the net everywhere. Because there were fewer people, if they went against Xiao Qing and the others, it would be like sending meat to them. They couldn't even make a splash. Originally, there were 6 people in a team, but now there were 12 in a team. In this way, if they met Xiao Qing and the others, even if they couldn't defeat them, they would have time to signal. Chapter 239. Xiao Qing and the others were even more cautious. After all, if they really encountered the enemy, they would be besieged before they could stop the enemy from releasing the signal. At that time, they would bring a bunch of burdens with them. It would be strange if they could break out of the encirclement. Hold on a little longer. The reinforcements will be here soon. Xiao Qing whispered. According to the time, Yan Hanqing and the others should be on their way back. If they walked faster, they would almost arrive at the survival base in Shilin. Han Lilin had made such a big move, mobilizing so many people to search for Xiao Qing and the others. Moreover, there were also those people that Xiao Qing had let go. Perhaps Yan Hanqing and the others would encounter a few of them. In short, no matter what the situation was, Yan Hanqing and the others should be able to find the place where they were surrounded. As long as the reinforcements arrived, they would be completely safe. Xiao Qing was the calmest among all of them. She kept calculating while walking. Han Lilin had less than 200 people in total, which referred to the paranormals, not ordinary people. This mountain was very large. He would definitely distribute the people evenly and leave some of them to block the entrance and the way out. The number of people used to block the entrance and exit must not be too small. Otherwise, they would be able to break out. In this way, there were at most 100 people on the mountain. If they were divided into more than a dozen teams to search for them all over the mountain, the probability of finding them was still not high. While walking up, Xiao Qing asked Xiao Tong to find a second, safer place. They were now carrying several wounded people. If they encountered Han Lilin's people, it would be extremely disadvantageous. Xiao Qing's idea was to find a safe place to put the wounded people, Fu Jingma, Little Bun, and the others down. They would continue to wander in the mountain and distract Han Lilin's attention. In this way, Little Bun and the others would be safe. Xiao Qing and the others were quite strong. Even if they encountered Han Lilin's people, the possibility of escaping was relatively high. Moreover, all they had to do was wander around and make some noise from time to time to attract Han Lilin's attention. After a while, Xiao Tong found the second safe hiding place. It was obviously safer than the first cave because the entrance was on the side of the cliff. Normal people wouldn't look at the bottom of the cliff due to inertia, so they wouldn't notice that there was a cave entrance 2 to 3 meters below the cliff. Xiao Qing used vines as ropes and put them down one by one. The last one to go down was Xiao Tong. She told Xiao Tong, "Take good care of Little Bun and the others. When we come back, no matter what you hear or see, don't come out. Do you understand?" Xiao Tong nodded seriously and said to Xiao Qing telepathically, "Sister Qing, don't worry. I'll take good care of them." Xiao Qing then put Xiao Tong down. After settling down those who didn't have any fighting power and the injured, Xiao Qing led the others to fight guerrilla warfare. Among them, even the weakest one could easily wipe out Han Lilin's team. Now that they didn't have any burdens, they were like fish that had returned to the sea. They were indescribably relaxed. Previously, they avoided Han Lilin's people. Now they took the initiative to look for Han Lilin's people, just like hunters looking for prey. As long as they encountered them, Xiao Qing and the others would directly kill them. Sometimes it was a team, sometimes it was a few people who were left alone. As long as they met Xiao Qing and the others, there was no way they could survive. Any one of these people had their hands stained with the blood of many ordinary people. Even if some of them didn't do it willingly, it didn't change the fact that they had been helping the evildoers for a long time. Against such people, Xiao Qing didn't have any concept of mercy. If they met Han Lilin's higher-ups, she wouldn't even let them die easily. That would be letting down those pitiful people who had been harmed by them, letting down the piles of bones in the pit, letting down the people whose families had been destroyed and who had been sold as playthings. If there was enough time, Shaoqing even wanted to let them fully experience what it was like to beg for death, and then send them to chat with God. No, such people could only go to hell after death. On the other side, Han Lilin's face was extremely dark. When he sent people out, he gave the order that every half an hour one person from each team should report to him. Now 3 hours had passed, but he had already lost contact with 4 teams. Chapter 240. If only 1 or 2 people had gone missing, it would be fine. After all, there were ferocious beasts roaming around the mountain. It was normal for 1 or 2 people to die. However, for teams, more than 50 people had gone missing. Could it be that these 50 people had run into a wolf's den by themselves? The more Han Lilin thought about it, the more creepy he felt. The biggest possibility was that these 4 teams had been killed by Shaoqing and the others. It was hard to believe. As the apocalypse progressed, the paranormals gradually leveled up. So far, the highest level of paranormals was only level 4. Han Lilin himself was a level 4 paranormal. It was not a problem for him to fight 3 or 4 level 3 paranormals. However, if there were more of them, he would be helpless. After all, he could kill a master with his fists. How many people did Shaoqing and the others have? There were ordinary people and children among them. At most, there were 6 or 7 of them. 4 teams of paranormals, nearly 50 people had been wiped out. Wasn't this a fantasy story? Moreover, there was no news, not even a distress signal. This was still unknown to Han Lilin. If he knew that there were only 4 people, he would probably curse Shaoqing and the others for cheating. Han Lilin gathered his subordinates and prepared to let them stay close to each other. That way, if some of them were attacked, the others could quickly come to support them. Even if there was no time to support, at least they could release a distress signal. Then he saw the fireworks exploding in the sky. Shaoqing and the others had attacked again. This time, Han Lilin did not need to gather his subordinates. Everyone who saw the distress signal rushed to the place where the signal was sent out. Han Lilin was no exception. He waved his hand and said, "Go. Let's go and see." At this time, if one looked down from the sky, he would find that people all over the mountain were consciously gathering in the direction of the fireworks. This time it was Shaoqing's carelessness. There was a paranormal with a self-healing ability. It was a very selfish ability, but it was also very powerful. Gu Panpan and Air Dai couldn't get rid of him in a short time. Instead, they let him release the signal. As soon as the signal was sent out, Shaoqing felt a little headache. She waved her hand, and the vines wrapped around the neck of the last psychic like a snake. She threw him like a sack, and the psychic hit the stone wall. His head was smashed like a watermelon. Retreat! Without wasting a second, Shaoqing called for her friends and began to retreat. However, at this moment the paranormals had already discovered the signal and were gathering in this location. Not long after Shaoqing and the others left, they encountered another group of paranormals. Those paranormals didn't say a word and sent out a few people to entangle Shaoqing and the others, while the remaining paranormals released a signal. No matter how fast Shaoqing and her friends were, it was impossible for them to kill a small group of paranormals. When they killed almost all of them, the remaining paranormals surrounded them. Originally, Shaoqing didn't want to fight. After all, their task was to stall for time, not to kill Han Lilin and the others. However, those paranormals didn't care about their lives and kept pestering them. After all, they were desperados in their bones and were fiercer than ordinary paranormals. Therefore, Shaoqing and the others were delayed. Seeing those paranormals surrounding them, Shaoqing sighed. She knew that there would be a tough battle today, and they couldn't escape. Break out as soon as you have the chance. Don't worry about me. Shaoqing had the space ability, and there were only a few people in the world who could stop her. However, Gu Panpan and the others were beside her, so Shaoqing couldn't get away. Chapter 241. I know. Yin Qiuyue nodded with a serious expression. He didn't want to be a burden to Shaoqing. Han Lilin really hated Shaoqing to the core. Before he arrived, his supernatural ability arrived first. The 6 flaming blades were aimed at Shaoqing, not at anyone else, and slashed at her. Some went straight for her eyes, some went for her heart, and some went for her lower body. Xiaoqing was like a fish. She curled up and went through the gap. As soon as she landed, the vines in her hand spread in all directions. Even Han Lilin was surprised by Xiaoqing's move. He didn't expect Xiaoqing to be so bold as to attack everyone at once. Gu Panpan and Xiaoqing had a tacit understanding. As soon as Xiaoqing made a move, she was like a strategic tank, crashing into a position. Those who tried to stop her were either crushed by Yin Qiue or knocked away by Gu Panpan. The only one who didn't move was Dai, who was responsible for protecting Xiaoqing and Yin Qiue. Although Dai and Yin Qiue were always jealous of each other, now was not the time for internal strife. Dai was very serious about protecting the two of them. If there were any tricks or superpowers aimed at Xiaoqing and Yin Qiue, Dai would clean them up. Gu Panpan had very good eyesight. She chose a place with the weakest defense to break out of the encirclement. She was the tip of a sharp knife while Xiaoqing was the blade. With Yin Qiue, the three of them were able to hold off a large group of people. There were also some who tried to take advantage of the situation to deal with Xiaoqing and Yin Qiue. But they were all torn apart by the two dummies within minutes. They broke through to the top of the mountain. How could Han Lilin let them go? Paranormals kept coming. With Han Lilin, a level 4 paranormal, Xiaoqing and the others were held back. Judging from the situation, Xiaoqing and the others had the upper hand. In fact, their superpowers were limited. Han Lilin's men were still coming to help. If this situation dragged on, there would only be one result. They didn't have enough superpowers and would be killed. Xiaoqing was very calm. She also had spirit power, but it was very weak compared to those psychic paranormals. However, after some learning, she could use this spirit power to temporarily act as a psychic paranormal. What she did was to spread out her weak spirit power to explore. Although Xiaoqing's spirit power was very weak, and she could only explore within a radius of 12 meters, it was enough. Xiaoqing moved while exploring. Soon she found several powerful forces, which came from mutant animals. Xiaoqing immediately informed Gu Panpan. They subconsciously walked to the place where the forces were fluctuating. It was very tiring to resist the attacks of a group of paranormals. Although they could kill a paranormal in a few moves, they had consumed a lot of their superpowers. If it went on like this, they would be exhausted and killed in 10 minutes. Fortunately, at this time, Xiaoqing and the others had moved to the designated place. Xiaoqing scanned with her spirit power and found what she was looking for. At that time, Xiaoqing took out a grenade from her space and threw it into the cave. Her action made some people who didn't know the situation laugh directly. If she threw the grenade into the crowd, she might be able to kill a few of them. If she was lucky, it wouldn't be a problem. But what was the use of throwing the grenade into the cave? To hear the echo? Soon there was an echo and an ear-piercing roar with deep anger. In the next second, a big tiger with yellow and black fur jumped out of the cave. Chapter 242. Xiaoqing's throw was very accurate. She had probably thrown it right around the tiger. This poor big tiger's fur had been blasted black. It was missing tufts here and there. The tiger didn't know who the culprit was. As soon as it jumped out, it attacked the first person it saw. It was fine if it was just one, after all, it was only a high-level level 3 tiger. But it had a wife and there was a tigress behind it. The tiger couple jumped into the crowd at that time and started a massacre. The mutant tiger was considered a high-level level 3 mutant tiger. It wasn't something ordinary level 3 and level 3 paranormals could resist. The paranormals who were chasing Xiaoqing immediately became chaotic. Retreat! Xiaoqing took the opportunity to throw Yin Qiue out of the crowd. Yin Qiue used the momentum and landed on a branch. Han Lilin naturally wouldn't let them leave. He was about to chase after them when Xiaoqing whipped him. Coincidentally, he hit the tigress's head. He landed on the tigress's head, and the tigress almost fainted. The tigress turned around and clawed at him. If Han Lilin didn't react quickly, he would have been slapped to the ground. Gu Panpan was at the front and rushed out. Han Lilin was entangled by the tiger and couldn't chase after them. Xiaoqing and the others broke out of the encirclement. Han Lilin was so angry that he stomped his feet. Chase! Chase! Don't let them escape. Han Lilin knew that the foundation he had built with his own hands had been destroyed by Xiaoqing just like that. In the future, he might have to spend the rest of his life on the run. He was a fugitive, and what he was best at was revenge. Before he fled for his life, he had to leave Shaoqing and the other culprits alive no matter what. It didn't matter even if he had to run for his life. In the survival base, he would go out to rob during the day and hide at night. Once he was surrounded, he would move his base. When the time came, he would find a remote place and lead his brothers. He could either be a bandit or build a small base. He could still live a happy life. Therefore, the same scene appeared again. The four of them were running in front while a group of people chased behind them. At this time, going up the mountain would be courting death. Those who were a little smarter knew that Han Lilin's people were blocking them on the other side of the mountain. Shaoqing turned around and ran back without saying anything. Yan Qiue was the slowest among the four. He was carried on Shaoqing's shoulders like a sack. After being jolted all the way, he almost vomited all his stomach acid. They were being chased, and their speed was unprecedentedly fast. Before they reached the foot of the mountain, they saw a group of people rushing over from the foot of the mountain. Shaoqing was startled, thinking that they were Han Lilin's reinforcements. After taking a closer look, she saw that the leader was Yan Hanqing. Reinforcements had arrived. At this time, Han Lilin had almost caught up with them. As soon as he looked up, he saw the four people slip into the crowd like slippery loaches and then look at him calmly. Han Lilin almost vomited blood at that time. Originally, he was the one chasing them, but now they were chasing him. Han Lilin turned around and ran without saying anything. His speed was faster than a rabbit's. This time it was Shaoqing who didn't want him to run. She threw Yan Qiue aside and jumped up. The vines that flew out hooked onto Han Lilin's ankle. Han Lilin ran too fast and was almost bitten off by the vines. At this time, the paranormals from the capital swarmed up. Han Lilin couldn't escape and was tied up like a fried dough twist. There are still some paranormals left at the foot of the mountain. Please go and clean them up. Shaoqing was relieved and said to the leader. Chapter 243. She glanced over. Oh, it was a familiar face. Wasn't this the captain of the Dark Assassins, Zhu Machen? Zhu Machen waved his hand and said lazily, brothers, split into 3 teams and search the area. Don't leave a single fish that escapes the net. The ability users under his command immediately split into 3 teams and headed in the direction that Shaoqing had pointed out. At that moment, the young man named Cheng Guanyin jumped out of the crowd. He had washed himself clean and was wearing a simple set of casual clothes. He actually looked quite handsome. I really have to thank you this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to leave this place alive. Those poor people would have been sold to other places, Cheng Guanyin said shyly as he scratched his head. Shaoqing smiled, then said, as long as someone with a bit of conscience saw something like this, they wouldn't tolerate it. Cheng Guanyin smiled, then said, Then what about elder sister Yan? Along the way, he had encountered many young men and women fleeing in all directions, but he hadn't seen Xie Chunyan. As soon as he saw Shaoqing, he couldn't help but ask. Shaoqing frowned slightly, but in the end, she still told him the truth. She also told Cheng Guanyin what Xie Chunyan had said before she died. Before she died, she asked me to pass on a message to you. If you have the chance to meet her younger sister, please take care of her for her. Cheng Guanyin's face immediately paled. Xie Chunyan had taken care of him extremely well. She was the nicest person to him aside from his family, but perhaps good people didn't live long. My condolences. Shaoqing didn't know how to comfort people, so she said dryly. Zhu Machen also patted Cheng Guanyin's shoulder, then said to Shaoqing, I really have to thank you for this. Otherwise, my stupid cousin would have died here. The relative Cheng Guanyin was talking about was Zhu Machen. He had originally wanted to seek refuge with Zhu Machen, but he hadn't expected to encounter such a situation on the way. Zhu Machen's eyes were bright as he spoke to Shaoqing. He looked at Shaoqing with a burning gaze. However, his burning gaze didn't contain any other emotions. Instead, it was filled with battle intent. Although Shaoqing's scalp was numb, she still stubbornly said, It's nothing. Since the matter has been resolved, I will go find my companions first. They are still hiding in the cave. Let me accompany Miss Xiao. Zhu Machen grinned slightly and laughed. When he wasn't sleepy, he looked like a very bright youth. It would have been very easy for people to have a good impression of him if his gaze wasn't so hot. Xiaoqing thought that she would ask them how to deal with Han Lilin later, so she agreed. The group of people headed towards the place where Little Bun and the others were hiding. When they arrived, even Zhu Machin sighed in praise. What a good place. If I hadn't known about it beforehand, I definitely wouldn't have gone down to investigate. Xiaoqing released a vine, and the people inside immediately climbed up one by one. Little Bun leapt into Xiaoqing's arms as soon as he came up, almost squashing Yaya. Yaya didn't know whether she was happy or in pain. She was squeezed between Little Bun and Xiaoqing's chests. Seeing how squashed Xiaoqing was, she was probably in pain. After all of her companions were reunited, Xiaoqing glanced at Han Lilin, who was tied up into a ball, and asked, I wonder how Han Lilin will be dealt with? How will his companions be dealt with? How will those people in the account book be dealt with? Zhu Machin scratched his head and said somewhat gloomily, although the higher-ups insist on enforcing the law, there are some things that they turn a blind eye to. For example, those names in the account book. As for Han Lilin and the others, their abilities will probably be crippled and they will be locked up. After all, they have to consider humanity, so I suggest. Zhu Machin looked at Han Lilin on the ground, his gaze cold. We don't have to bring them back. We can just say that they were killed during the struggle. After Xiaoqing dug out the crystal nucleus, she kicked his body as if she was kicking a piece of garbage. She kicked his body into the grass and controlled the daughter to turn into ashes, so that it wouldn't affect the surrounding plants. Only then did she say, as for the remaining accomplices, do you still leave them to me? Zhu Machin immediately said, leave them to me. I just order people to dig a big pit. In a while, all the bodies will be buried in it, so that they won't pollute the environment. Xiaoqing nodded. This was probably an eye for an eye. They created that inhumane pit, so they were destined to be killed by others. After dealing with the accomplices, the people that Zhu Machin had sent out also returned. They caught all the ability users that were guarding the other side of the mountain in one fell swoop, then buried them on the spot. Only after burying them did they return to report on their mission. Chapter 245. Everything that needs to be taken care of has been taken care of. I should be leaving. Xiaoqing handed the three of them to Zhu Machin, then said, these three are also victims. His leg is broken and he will need a long time to recover. This is his medicine. I hope you can take them back to the capital and give them a place to stay. Zhu Machin nodded. That's not a problem. I can still afford to raise a few people, but I have a request. Xiaoqing raised an eyebrow. What request? Fight with me. Ever since you challenged that Abe Shizuk in the capital, I've wanted to fight with you, Zhu Machin said eagerly. Zhu Machin said eagerly. The light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter, causing Xiaoqing's scalp to go numb and goosebumps to appear all over her body. Xiaoqing couldn't help but rub her head. She originally thought that Zhu Machin was a lazy person, but she didn't expect him to be a battle maniac. She was really tired today and didn't want to fight anymore. As a result, she said, you've been running around all day and I've also been busy all day. Neither of us are at our best. How about this? I'll be going to the capital in a while. When the time comes, we can have a good fight, okay? Zhu Machin was a bit reluctant, but what Xiaoqing said was true, so he agreed. Then he said, since that's the case, I won't make things difficult for you. I'll take my people back the way we came. Do you want me to send you off? Xiaoqing shook her head. It's getting late, and my teammates are also very tired. I'm going to find a nearby survivor base and rest for the night. We'll continue tomorrow. Everyone be careful. Zhu Machin immediately said, since that's the case, let's go together. It's dangerous to travel at night, and you should be able to recover your strength after resting for a night. We'll fight tomorrow morning, then go our separate ways. That's a good thing. Xiaoqing was speechless. If she had known earlier, she would have traveled through the night. However, since she had already said it, Xiaoqing could only say, then let's go together. The group of people went to the nearest survivor base. The base chief came out to greet them. After all, The title of one of the 4 major mercenary groups in the capital was quite intimidating. After settling down, Xiaoqing first went to exchange for some fresh fruits and vegetables before rolling back to her room to rest. She was really too tired today. Even with her tireless body, she couldn't bear it mentally. So with little Bun in her arms, Dumbo in her arms, and Yin Qiuyue in her arms, she nestled in her bed and fell asleep. When she was about to fall asleep, Xiaoqing was still thinking about how to deal with Fu Jingma. Although Fu Jingma's mistake today was just an accident, Xiaoqing still disliked him even more. If it really didn't work, she might as well let Zhu Machun take Fu Jingma away as well. At worst, she could just give Zhu Machun some crystals as a babysitter fee. Moreover, Zhu Machun's influence wasn't small. Protecting Fu Jingma should be a small matter. When Dai recovered her memories, if she still needed Fu Jingma, she could just go to the capital and bring him back. It was convenient and saved her energy. Was there a better choice? After thinking about a lot of things, Xiaoqing quickly fell asleep. The next morning when she went downstairs, Zhu Machun and the others were already sitting around the table, waiting to eat. Last night Yan Hanqing had cooked. Yan Hanqing's cooking was known to be good. After Zhu Machun freeloaded for a meal, he didn't want to eat the food cooked by his group anymore. Thus he came over this morning to freeload for a meal. When Xiaoqing saw Fu Jingma, she remembered what she was thinking about last night. Then she looked at Zhu Machun, whose eyes were shining brightly as he looked at the kitchen. He seemed a little unreliable. She should just throw Fu Jingma to Zhu Machun. She happily decided. Chapter 246. After dinner, Xiaoqing straightforwardly expressed her thoughts. I want to entrust Fu Jingma to you as well. He's an ordinary person and it's not suitable for him to wander around with me and face all sorts of dangers. No matter what, things in the capital are more peaceful and life is better. You can bring him back too. I'll pay for his daily food and clothing. Fu Jingma's face immediately turned pale. He didn't hold his chopsticks tightly and they fell to the ground. After the apocalypse, he had tasted the pain of living under someone else's roof and not being able to eat enough and wear warm clothes. Especially as a normal person who was born in a rich family, Fu Jingma had suffered a lot. When Xiaoqing appeared in front of him, Fu Jingma knew that his chance had come. However, because of Dai, Xiaoqing treated him well. At least she gave him the best food and clothing. She also didn't restrict his freedom and didn't give him any face. She also didn't polish his self-esteem. This was simply unbelievably good treatment. No matter what, he wouldn't give up on Xiaoqing. However, Xiaoqing now told him that she wanted to hand him over to Zhu Machun and bring him to the capital. This was simply a bolt from the blue for Fu Jingma, who had some unspeakable thoughts in his heart. He looked at Xiaoqing with a pale face. After a while he said softly, Am I holding you back? Xiaoqing was very calm. You're just a normal person. My teammates and I often go on missions. The difficulty is high and the danger is high. I can't guarantee your safety. After you go to the capital with Zhu Machun, no one will make things difficult for you. I'll pay Zhu Machun crystals to give you the best. You don't have to worry. In fact, Fu Jingma also knew that this was the best. Xiaoqing was willing to take care of him for the rest of his life because of Dai. However, Fu Jingma couldn't and wasn't willing to leave. He remembered what happened at that time more clearly than anyone else. Once Dai recovered his memory one day, the stability and comfort he had would become an illusion and would be shattered in an instant. If there wasn't any so-called friendship, Xiaoqing wouldn't care about him anymore. How could he allow such a situation to happen? I'm not afraid. Fu Jingma clenched his fists. His face was filled with determination. I don't want to live a peaceful life. I want to follow you. I can watch the house when you go on missions or accompany you. I can go anywhere. I'm not afraid. Gu Panpan had a good impression of Fu Jingma. Although he had made a small mistake previously, it wasn't intentional. When she saw Fu Jingma's pitiful appearance, her heart instantly softened. She said softly, Sister Qing, why don't we keep him? Anyway, it's just one more mouthful of food. At most we can let him stay in the base and watch over the house for us when we go on missions. This way we won't let those ignorant people take over our house. Gu Chuan silently pulled his sister. He now felt that Gu Panpan was the most ignorant person. Xiaoqing clearly didn't like Fu Jingma and wanted to chase him away for a reason. His sister was clearly a smart person. Why couldn't she see through him? However, Xiaoqing still had to give face to Gu Panpan. The rejection that was already at the tip of her tongue was slowly swallowed back down. Xiaoqing glanced at Fu Jingma. Fu Jingma immediately said, "I definitely won't be a burden to you. When we return to the base, I can find a job to support myself. Can you? Can you keep me?" Zhu Machen looked at Fu Jingma as if he was watching a show. He then glanced at Xiaoqing. There was no expression on his face, but his eyes were full of ridicule. "Captain Xiao, have you made your decision?" Chapter 247. Xiaoqing didn't want to say anything more to Zhu Machen. She nodded and said, "Since he doesn't want to leave, I won't force him. Let's leave it at that for now." Zhu Machen's interest was immediately piqued. "Since we've decided, let's get down to business. Should we go out and exchange pointers or go to the plaza?" Xiaoqing was speechless. Just how obsessed was this child when it came to exchanging pointers? "The weather is pretty good." Xiaoqing was silent for a while before she suddenly said something. Zhu Machen mulled it over for a while before he finally understood what Xiaoqing meant. The weather was pretty good, so fighting would ruin the mood. Zhu Machen wasn't a martial arts fanatic. At most he was half a fanatic. However, he was extremely curious about Xiaoqing. Zhu Machen had seen Xiaoqing fight Abe Shirzwa before. She was in a sorry state, but her brilliance was so dazzling that people couldn't take their eyes off her. He had also seen Xiaoqing's decisive and ruthless side. The more he saw it, the more he wanted to know what kind of person Xiaoqing was, and what her limits were. Xiaoqing was determined not to fight with Zhu Machen. No matter what Zhu Machen said, she just looked out the window with an expression that said, "The weather is fine outside, and I can't hear anything." In the beginning, Zhu Machen was quite patient. When Xiaoqing didn't reply, he continued to ask. In the end, no matter how patient a person was, they couldn't take it anymore and he directly took action. In the end, Xiaoqing just sat there calmly. The metal spikes were already in front of her, but she didn't fight back. She didn't even blink. However, Zhu Machen's eyelids twitched fiercely. He gritted his teeth and said, "You win." Then, he left with his subordinates. Xiaoqing smiled but didn't say anything. Zhu Machen was still too inexperienced to fight with her. Before they left, the lame boy came over to Xiaoqing with the help of the girl to thank her. He looked at Xiaoqing seriously, as if he wanted to remember Xiaoqing deeply in his mind. Xiaoqing didn't think too much about it. She had killed and saved countless people in her life. If she had to remember all of them, it would be killing her. After sending Zhu Machen off, Xiaoqing and the others also left. They dawdled for a long time and wasted quite a bit of time. The rest of the journey was smooth, and they didn't encounter any major issues. They only encountered a few high-leveled zombies, and in the end, they all became nuclei in Xiaoqing's storage. Xiaoqing and the others finally returned to the S-City survivor base, just before the fruits and vegetables they had bought were almost finished. Before entering the base, they had to check the information. The guards looked at Xiaoqing and the others with a surprised expression. In the past, it wasn't that there hadn't been a team of ability users that left for so long, but most of those teams never returned. They were all wiped out during a mission. Xiaoqing and the others who didn't return for a few months were almost sentenced to death. If Yenruru hadn't reported to Xiaoqing and the others when they came back, Xiaoqing and the others' household registration would probably have been revoked. However, Xiaoqing and the others came back just like that without any casualties. This was simply a miracle. No, wait, there was one more person. The extra person, Fu Jingma, still had to go through a night of surveillance before he could enter the base, so Xiaoqing and the others went in first. After entering the base, the group of people went straight to the base. Before they even got close, they saw a few people fighting in front of the base, and there were many people watching from the surroundings. When they got closer, they heard that they were actually dividing these two houses. In the beginning, for convenience, Xiaoqing and Yan Hanqing lived close to each other. Later, Gu Panpan and Zhu Machen also moved in. The three houses were neighbors, and the people fighting in front of the gate were fighting over the ownership of these three houses. Chapter 248. The battle had actually come to an end. The loser wiped the blood on his face, left a few harsh words and ran away. The winner was immensely proud of himself. He stood at the door wishing he could announce it to the world. Xiaoqing wanted to cover her eyes. She looked up and saw that the lock on the door had been pried open and replaced with a new one. Obviously, her house had long been occupied. Xiaoqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She stepped forward and patted the shoulder of the man who was about to enter the house. "Brother, who picked the lock? Who opened the door? Who allowed you to live in? The owner of this house is not dead yet." The man turned around and looked at Xiaoqing. He didn't know her, so he thought she was a newcomer. He sneered. "How do you know that the owner of this house is not dead? I also said that he is dead. Go away, go away. I am in a good mood today, so I won't lower myself to your level." Xiaoqing was so angry that she laughed. How could a person who had occupied the Nestle's house be so righteous? She firmly grasped the man's shoulder and said lightly, "What if I insist that you have to show me?" Xiaoqing was very strong. The man struggled twice but couldn't break free. He felt a little embarrassed. He turned back and glared at Xiaoqing. Then he found that Xiaoqing was very beautiful. In the post-apocalyptic world, there were 3 types of women. The first type was those who looked ordinary and could only rely on their physical strength or a good husband to survive in the post-apocalyptic world. The second type was those who looked ordinary but had special abilities. They could rely on their own strength to earn money for their daily necessities. The third type was those who were beautiful. The last type was like a vine, clinging onto powerful men. They relied on their own bodies to survive. Women like Xiaoqing who had strength and beauty were the minority. Just by looking at Xiaoqing's appearance, she was extremely outstanding. Her facial features were exquisite, especially her eyebrows, which were exceptionally alluring. Coupled with her outstanding strength, she carried a confident and powerful aura, which was clearly different from those women who clung onto others like vines. Men preferred to conquer difficult women. So when the man saw Xiaoqing, he even forgot to breathe. Xiaoqing frowned impatiently and said, "This house is mine. You picked my lock and occupied my house. You should give me an explanation, right?" The man's eyes flashed with lust. He reached out to hold Xiaoqing and said, "What else do you want? Let's move in together. You don't have to go out to do any tasks in the future. So hard. We brothers will take care of you and make you happy." Just as he finished speaking, before his hand could touch Xiaoqing's shoulder, Yan Qiue grabbed his wrist and twisted it. His bones were twisted into a fried dough twist, and his bones were about to shatter. That person screamed in pain. Yan Qiue snorted coldly and said, "If your tongue isn't clean, you'll pull it out. If your hands and feet aren't clean, you'll break them. If your eyeballs are looking around, you'll dig them out. Am I right? Fuck you." Just as the man was about to curse, a gust of wind swept past his eyes. Then he felt a sharp pain like a tidal wave. His mouth was torn open, and this was because Xiaoqing had stopped air dye. Otherwise it wouldn't be as simple as a cut. Just as Yan Qiue said, if your tongue is dirty, you should pull it out. After all, Xiaoqing didn't want to make a big deal out of this. They had just returned and this house was like their home. Who would fight to the death with someone after returning home after such a long journey? So she softened her expression and said, "This house is indeed mine. Now that the owner is back, please move out quickly. I'll give you 1 minute. If you don't move out, don't blame me for sending you on your way." Chapter 249. Those people were like local ruffians in the base. How could they be willing to give up the house that they had just gotten? Although Xiaoqing and the others weren't there before, Yenruru had been helping Xiaoqing and the others to look after the property, so no one dared to occupy Xiaoqing's house. Not long ago, Yenruru left the S-City survivor base with her team of paranormals, so they became arrogant. However, after 2 days, Xiaoqing and the others came back. They didn't want to give up the house at all, so they started to curse. Xiaoqing looked at the time and waited for a minute. They still didn't want to stop, so she directly threw them out. There were 7 or 8 people in this group, and all of them were thrown away by Xiaoqing and the others as if they were garbage. Some of them tried to struggle, but their arms and legs were broken. Some of them spoke vulgarly, but their mouths were stuffed with smelly socks. In short, the group of people looked very miserable. Xiaoqing entered the house and couldn't help frowning. All the furnishings in her house were changed, and many used furniture were gone. Xiaoqing tidied up and threw out all the things that had been used by those people, replacing them with new ones. Therefore, before the group of injured people could get up from the ground, they were thrown a pile of rubbish, such as quilts, old sofas, curtains, bowls, and chopsticks. Fortunately, Xiaoqing's food storage was still there. She had stored the food in the storeroom. Those people might have just moved in and hadn't had time to search around. Xiaoqing was very satisfied with this. She had done a lot of quests and raided a lot of granaries to save up the food. If it was stolen by someone else, she would be very distressed. Yan Hanqing and Gu Chuan also went back to their own houses to clean up, but Yan Qiuyue came with Xiaoqing. Fortunately, Xiaoqing's house was not small. There were 2 bedrooms and a bed, which was enough for Yan Qiuyue to sleep in. In the past, Xiaoqing and Erdai slept in the same room, while Xiaoqing slept in the other room. Sometimes Little Bun would follow Xiaoqing and sometimes Xiaotong. Now Yan Qiuyue was added. Xiaoqing's original idea was to put another bed in her room and let Xiaotong sleep there. Erdai and Yan Qiuyue would sleep in the room next door. Then, as soon as the new bedding was laid out, Yan Qiuyue and Dummy consciously came over to help. The 2 of them spontaneously put the 2 beds together, changing from 2 single beds to a luxurious double bed. Xiaoqing, who's going to drag these 2 lunatics away? Yan Qiuyue and Erdai's intention was obvious. They wanted to sleep with her even when they went home. Although it was a very dirty thing to hug one woman on the left and the other on the right, Xiaoqing didn't want to be dirty at all. She didn't think it was sexy at all. During this period of time, the 2 of them were quite well behaved. In the beginning, when they slept in the same bed, the 2 of them would scheme against each other. They would secretly scratch and scratch each other. Xiaoqing couldn't sleep for the whole night. Erdai was fine. He was a zombie. It was fine if he didn't sleep for the whole night. Where did Yan Qiuyue's energy come from? She played with Erdai every night. Xiaoqing couldn't sleep for nearly half a month. Later, she got angry and threw the 2 of them out. Only then did they become well behaved. Xiaoqing's expression was a little bit serious when she was thinking. Erdai and Yan Qiuyue were very familiar with Xiaoqing. When they saw the situation, they knew that Xiaoqing was thinking about how to throw them out. Therefore, the 2 of them tacitly stepped forward. One of them massaged her shoulders while the other massaged her legs. At this moment, Yan Qiuyue also gave up fighting with Dumbo. She said very seriously, "Qing, you also know my body. My stomach disease is most likely to act up in the middle of the night. Don't you worry about letting me sleep in another room?" Xiaoqing said calmly, "Don't worry." Yan Qiuyue choked. Then she lay on Xiaoqing's legs and pretended to cry, "Qing, I'm scared. It's so dark at night. I don't want to sleep alone. Please let me stay in your room." Xiaoqing was still very calm. "Erdai will accompany you." Yan Qiuyue choked again. Erdai was so anxious that he scratched his ears and cheeks. He wished that he could talk and act like a spoiled child. After thinking carefully, Yan Qiuyue said to Xiaoqing, "Qing, you know that once I start experimenting I'll never stop. I often forget to eat and sleep. I've been researching food that zombies can eat these days. If you didn't wake me up every night, I definitely wouldn't go to sleep. Are you really not worried about me?" Xiaoqing touched Yan Qiuyue's head and smiled. "Erdai will wake you up." Yan Qiuyue was completely helpless. She began to roll around and act like a spoiled child. She was determined to sleep with Xiaoqing. This was a good time to cultivate their relationship. What if someone sneaked in to take advantage of Xiaoqing in the middle of the night when he slept in another room? Only when he slept with Xiaoqing at night could he nip those who tried to attack him in the bud. For this reason, Yan Qiuyue decided to risk everything. He didn't want dignity or face. What could be more important than his wife? Erdai also supported him. Xiaoqing would never favor one over another. Either both of them could stay or both of them would be kicked out. Therefore, he had to support Yan Qiuyue. At such a critical time, infighting was a very unwise choice. The 2 of them looked at each other. They quickly took off their shoes and coats and crawled under the quilt, one on the left and one on the right, leaving an empty space in the middle. It was just enough for Xiaoqing to sleep there. Xiaoqing looked helpless. Aren't you going to eat this afternoon? The two of them shook their heads at the same time. Eat what? How could eating be so important? Chapter 250. You don't want to eat? Then I'll go out first. Xiaoqing turned around and left calmly. The two men lying in bed were speechless. After Xiaoqing went out, she went to the mission hall first. There was no free time in the apocalypse, so she had to think about the next mission. As for the mission, it wasn't easy to choose. First, it had to be suitable for their current level. Second, it couldn't be too excessive. If any of them got hurt, Xiaoqing would be very distressed. Third, it had to be effective. As for the reward, it didn't matter. Xiaoqing looked through all the missions and finally chose two. One was a bodyguard mission. She had to escort a special paranormal to the forest next to the S-City survivor base to catch some high-level mutated animals. She would only know the details of this kind of mission after she accepted it. What Xiaoqing had her eyes on was this forest. This forest was quite big. When the survivor base of S-City was built nearby, it was because they wanted to rely on the forest to eat the forest. Unexpectedly, after the apocalypse, the mutated animals became stronger and stronger. Instead, the base had to divide some of its forces to monitor the whole forest. It was not worth the loss. However, this task was not the best choice because he didn't know the employer's situation. If the employer was smart, neither arrogant nor selfish, and did things properly, then it would be fine. However, if the employer met a bad-tempered person who insisted on telling him what to do and meddled in every matter, he was afraid that before he encountered any danger in the forest, he would be dealt with by Xiaoqing's family, especially someone with a bad temper like Yan Qiwa. The reason why Xiaoqing took a second look at this mission was because the reward for this mission was very generous. There were even 3 special spirit crystals, which were very suitable for Xiao Tong. Moreover, this mission wasn't urgent. She heard that the employer was from another big base and had to stay in the S-City survivor base for 2 months. In other words, they might have to enter the forest more than once. The second mission was an official mission. From the Southernmost Research Institute, there were several expert-level researchers coming over. The research institute there had been occupied by zombies, and these experts were going to be sent to the capital. It was said that they were going to participate in some big project. Of course, this was not the key point. The key point was that the mercenary group that escorted the experts had lost a lot of manpower and urgently needed to replenish their manpower. Therefore, when they passed by the S-City survivor base, they issued this mission. From the S-City survivor base, they gathered 2 or 3 relatively strong teams of paranormals and escorted them to the capital. This was the second task that Xiaoqing was slightly interested in. He heard that the research project was related to preventing ordinary people from being infected by zombies. This was something that would benefit the country and the people. If Xiaoqing couldn't find a more suitable task for them, he would take this one. The third mission was a cleanup mission, which was to explore and clean up the original S-City. From this, it could be seen that the base leader of the S-City survivor base was very ambitious. He wanted to be the second Kyoto survivor base. However, the S-City couldn't be cleaned up in a short period of time. Even if it could be cleaned up, it would be very difficult to move back. These 3 missions were the ones that caught Xiaoqing's eye out of the entire mission, and also allowed her to gain experience from her group of companions. However, since they had just come back, they could rest for a while. Xiaoqing didn't immediately choose a mission. Only the mission of escorting the researchers to the capital had a time requirement. Xiaoqing pondered and decided to rest for a few days. If this mission was still lacking people, they could also make a trip. The next day, Fu Jingma came back. The moment he came back, he was sent to Yan Hanqing's house by Xiaoqing before he could even enter the house. Chapter 251. Her excuse was that her house was too big for her. It was not a big house to begin with, but 5 to 6 people were sleeping in it. It was quite difficult for this house. Fu Jingma had just returned. After at most an hour, someone was banging on the door outside. It was only around 8 o'clock, and the hard-working ones had already gotten up. For example, Yan Qiue was still lying on the bed sleeping when she was woken up by the knocking on the door. She was so angry that she threw an alarm clock outside, but she did not know if it hit anyone. Xiaoqing got up early and was stewing soup in the kitchen. Just as the aroma of the soup wafted out, someone knocked on the door. Xiaoqing wiped her hands and went to open the door. There were many people standing outside the door. The person at the front was someone she was familiar with. It was the group of people she had thrown out yesterday. There were also a few people Xiaoqing did not know, but they seemed to be high-leveled mutants. When the door opened, the person who was beaten the most miserably yesterday immediately pointed at Xiaoqing and said, "Captain, it's her." Xiaoqing raised her eyebrows and laughed. "What's wrong? You took someone else's house and in the end you still want to settle the score with the owner? I'm a protective person. No matter what, you beat up my brothers. This matter can't be settled just like this. Otherwise, people will say that our Kunpeng mutant team is a group of cowards." The leader was a fair-skinned young man, but his words were not very reasonable. Coincidentally, Xiaoqing was also a very protective person. She would help those close to her and not reason with them. Hence, she nodded in understanding and said, "How do you want to settle this? Tell me, I'll accept it." You're a straightforward person. Since we're all paranormals, I won't bully you. I heard that you're also a paranormal team. So let's start a game and learn from each other. 5 games, 3 wins. If you lose, you have to apologize and compensate for my brother's medical expenses. This matter will be over. If I lose, I'll also apologize to you and compensate for your mental damage. How about it? What do you think? Xiaoqing nodded. This condition was actually not too much. After all, the apocalypse was an era where people used their fists to reason. Whoever had the bigger fist would be on the side of reason. She said that others had taken her house first, so it was reasonable for her to fight back. However, if she was not able to beat these people and was thrown out, no one would help her get her house back. It was that realistic. I want to add one more condition. If you lose, he and his brothers will have to crawl away. Xiaoqing smiled and said in a very cold voice. Although she understood that the person who came to pick a fight because of her, it didn't mean that she didn't have a temper. She had occupied her house and dared to talk dirty. After being chased away, she called someone to come and take revenge. She had repeatedly challenged her patience. Did she really think that she was a sick cat? As soon as Xiaoqing's words came out, the face of the leading fair-skinned youth turned ugly. He said coldly, "That will depend on your ability." Xiaoqing nodded and clapped her hands to call Air Dai. Then she said, "Go and call Pan Pan, Gu Chuan and the others. If they're free, they can come and watch the show." Air Dai obeyed. To put it bluntly, with Xiaoqing's strength, it was not a big problem for her to challenge ordinary small bases. She really did not care about these people in front of her. Not long after, Gu Pan Pan and the others all came over. Even Yan Qiue was yawning, and there was even a strand of hair on her head that had curled up from sleep. Xiaotong followed behind her. Xiaotong was holding Little Bun in her arms, and Little Bun was holding Yi in his arms. To be honest, compared with the opposite side, Xiaoqing's group was like a mob. Chapter 252. Yan Qiue in her pajamas, Xiaotong with a child in her arms, Air Dai with an abnormal brain, Gu Pan Pan with her face still covered in seaweed mud, Yan Hanqing with a pink apron, and Gu Chuan with a twisted expression. The only one who looked normal was probably Fu Jingma. However, he was an ordinary person and that was the biggest abnormality. Of course, there was also Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing looked at her group of freakish teammates and her expression stiffened. There's a challenge. Pan Pan, you can go wash your face first. Hanqing, I still have a pot of soup in the kitchen. If you're too lazy to go out, you can watch the soup for me. If you're willing to go out, you can take off your scarf. Qiue, go change your clothes first. What if you ruin your pajamas when we fight later? After she finished speaking, those who originally thought that she was normal suddenly felt that Xiaoqing was the most abnormal one. Yan Hanqing was the first to move. He took off his apron and passed it to Fu Jingma. His intention was simple. Fu Jingma would be in charge of watching the soup. Gu Chuan reached out and took the apron. His voice was also wooden. I'll do it. Xiaoqing looked at him again and couldn't help but admire Gu Chuan's attentiveness. Gu Chuan was really a meticulous person, so he could see the distrust in her eyes. Thus, only Fu Jingma and Gu Chuan were left behind. The rest of the people packed up and accompanied this group of people to the square. In the base, it was very common for people to come out to solve problems if there was a grudge, but it wasn't a deep hatred. Therefore, it was very common for people to come out to solve problems. Whether it was ordinary people or mutants, they all liked to watch such a scene. The days were long and boring. If there was nothing to relieve their boredom, it would be very boring. Moreover, watching a scene was a unique hobby of the people. Even during the apocalypse, their love for watching a scene didn't diminish. When Xiaoqing and the group of people stood in the middle of the square, those experienced people knew that the one-on-one fight was about to begin. They crowded around them. However, those onlookers were quite sensible. They knew to leave an open space for them to fight. Mutants didn't have eyes. If you were accidentally injured when you got too close, you could only blame it on your bad luck. You couldn't blame anyone. Who asked you to come over to watch the show? Of course, the most important thing was that the youth's group was a famous mutant team. They were ranked in the base. Even if you were accidentally injured, you wouldn't dare to find trouble with them. After Xiaoqing and the others sat down in their respective seats, the two sides began to discuss. Since everyone is ready, let's not waste time. Who's the first one? Xiaoqing calmly played with her long fingernails and lazily raised her eyebrows. The fair-skinned youth pointed at a man beside him. Chapter 253. The fair-skinned young man didn't underestimate Gu Panpan. In this post-apocalyptic world, the younger the paranormals were, the more dangerous they were. It was like how the younger the paranormals were, the easier it was for them to mutate into high-level zombies after being infected. Young people's potential and speed of evolution were faster. Gu Panpan dared to be the first one to stand out, so she must have some real skills. However, he believed in Lu San. Although Lu San was a strength paranormal, and in the middle of the post-apocalyptic world, strength paranormals had gradually fallen behind, but Lu San's strength was still very strong. Ordinary nature paranormals at the same level didn't dare to say that they could defeat Lu San. The two paranormals stood in the middle, and then the fight began. From the beginning, the gap between Gu Panpan and Lu San could be seen. As soon as Lu San came up, the first thing he did was to activate his ability. He was a very strong man, and as soon as he activated his ability, his muscles swelled, and his whole body seemed to be inflated with air. As for Gu Panpan, she didn't even activate her ability before she gave Lu San a kick. She was already a very high-level strength-based ability user. Even if she didn't activate her ability, her strength was still much higher than that of an average ability user. Lu San was busy activating his ability, so Gu Panpan's kick caused him to fall on his butt, causing him to sit on the ground. Before the crowd laughed, Lu San's face turned red. It was indeed a very shameful thing to be kicked to the ground by a little girl. Then Gu Panpan activated her ability. If it was said that Lu San's entire body had grown bigger and looked extremely tall, then Gu Panpan's appearance after she activated her ability was horrifying. She was a thin and cute little girl, but in an instant, she became a muscular and powerful King Kong Barbie. Her face and body were extremely uncoordinated, and it looked a little scary at first glance. For the next few minutes, it was Gu Panpan's show. The onlookers all had their mouths and eyes wide open as they stared at the scene. Gu Panpan was like a female Hercules, grabbing Lu San's leg and swinging him around like a sack. She beat him up in all sorts of ways. From start to finish, Lu San didn't even have the chance to fight back. In 3 minutes, Lu San was lying on the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. Gu Panpan moved her hands and feet and complained, "I just warmed up. Why is he lying on the ground? Boring." The onlookers were speechless. This was a female tiger, a female Tyrannosaurus rex, a female Tyrannosaurus. Women really couldn't be judged by appearance. Xiaoqing looked at the fair-skinned man with a smile. Panpan is young. She doesn't like to think before she speaks. Don't be angry. That person was obviously furious, but he could only grit his teeth and say, "Of course I'm not angry. I like such a straightforward personality. Who's next? Panpan hasn't had enough fun yet." Naturally, it's still her. Xiao Qing said indifferently. To tell the truth, she had not prepared for a second person to go up today. Gu Panpan going up against 5 was a simple matter that could not be any simpler. The fair-skinned man's mouth was a little stiff. After a while he said, "In that case, Li Qi, you go." Another silent youth stood up and walked over. The moment he made his move, it could be seen that he was much stronger than Lu San. However, he only made a single move before he was beaten up. Gu Panpan hadn't sparred with anyone for a long time. Especially the feeling of punching flesh. It was very comfortable. As long as she got close, there was no way to turn the tables. Li Qi only had time to release a wind blade before he was beaten into the air by Gu Panpan. Then for the next 3 minutes, his feet didn't touch the ground. It was over before it even started. The fair-skinned youth's expression was already very ugly. 2 people had come out in a row, and they had both been beaten up like dead dogs by Gu Panpan. More importantly, Gu Panpan didn't even use any moves. She only used her bare fists to beat them up, and the 2 of them were lying on the ground. This was a disgrace. Xiao Qing, on the other hand, was smiling rather happily. She propped up her chin and said, "Panpan, are you tired? Do you want Han Qing to replace you?" Gu Panpan shook her head like a rattle drum. "Sister Qing, I just finished warming up. I'm not tired at all." The fair-skinned man became even more depressed. He gritted his teeth and said, "We agreed on 3 wins out of 5. It's not very good for you to only send 1 person." Xiao Qing touched her chin and felt that she should give the other party some face. She said, "Panpan, why don't you come down first? I'll warm up with you later. Who wants to go up for another round?" Yan Hanqing said, "How about I do it?" Xiao Qing nodded. Yan Hanqing was a lightning ability user. She was actually quite worried that Yan Hanqing couldn't control his power well, and directly kill the other party. However, since Yan Hanqing was willing to fight, she naturally wouldn't stop him. In fact, she was quite happy. After all, Yan Hanqing was usually very boring and rarely asked for help. As soon as Yan Hanqing stood up, the fair-skinned man also gritted his teeth and stood up. They were playing 3 wins out of 5. If they lost this round, then there wouldn't be a next round. So he had to make a comeback. Otherwise, their face as an ability user team would be completely lost. After all, as long as someone investigated, they would know why this competition started. They went to find trouble and proposed a competition of 3 wins out of 5. In the end, they let the other party win 3 times in a row. They didn't even have a chance to win 5 rounds. How embarrassing would that be? This was too much of a double standard. Could it be that only the state officials were allowed to set fires but the common people were not allowed to light lamps? This matter was indeed too damaging to their reputation. The few of them looked at each other. They were determined not to keep their promise. Xiao Qing looked at their red eyes and suddenly laughed. "That day you guys forcefully occupied my house and even touched me. At that time I was in a good mood and didn't want to lower myself to your level, so I let you guys go. Who would have thought that the next day you guys would bring people over to find fault with me? If you want to find fault with me, then so be it. If you lose, then crawl out of here. Although I think you guys are useless, you guys look like men. I didn't expect that I was wrong. But I didn't think that I was wrong. No matter how thick-skinned those people were, they couldn't help but feel ashamed. After all, they were the ones who took someone else's house. They were the ones who spoke rudely. After that, they were the ones who found people to look for trouble. They were also the ones who agreed to those conditions. Chapter 255. Now that they had lost, wouldn't they still be the ones to turn their backs on them? Although they were a little embarrassed, they still straightened their necks and refused to admit it. Otherwise, if they crawled out of here today, their reputation would spread all over the base tomorrow. Xiao Qing wasn't going to let them off. There was a saying that went, "Heaven's sins can be forgiven, but the sins we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear." It was all their own doing, so how could they beg others to be soft-hearted? Gu Panpan was the fastest. She hadn't had enough fun, and now that she took a big step forward, Someone who wanted to stop her was directly slapped to the ground by her. The other person was one of the group that came yesterday. Gu Panpan grabbed his shoulder and pressed it down hard. That person was originally standing on the ground, but this time, his legs couldn't help but give way and he knelt on the ground. Gu Panpan was so strong that only a crisp sound was heard, and that person's kneecap was broken. He screamed in pain, and his pants were dyed red with blood. When the rest of the people saw this, they directly attacked Gu Panpan. Xiaoqing was very relieved and let Gu Panpan play, but she watched carefully. If Gu Panpan was in any danger, she would be able to save her immediately. Gu Panpan picked a group by herself, and her eyesight was very good. Those who had their legs broken by her were definitely those who came yesterday. Soon, a group of people were lying on the ground screaming in pain. Only then did Gu Panpan stop. Rolling up her sleeves, she walked towards Xiaoqing, pouting as she muttered, "Who told you to have such foul mouths? Humph, if I had known earlier, I would have used more strength and crushed all of your bones to help my big sister Qing vent her anger." The fair-skinned youth had been watching expressionlessly. On one side was the promise he made, and on the other side was his own brothers. He had nothing to say and could only wait for everything to end. He silently clasped his hands to Xiaoqing and prepared to leave with his brothers. Xiaoqing said lightly, "Don't forget your promise. I said crawl out, not carry him out." He gritted his teeth, his chest trembling with anger, but he didn't say anything. After all, they were the ones who had agreed. They were like frogs at the bottom of a well, looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. They thought that they were strong enough to look down on most paranormals and that they would definitely win. In the end, they realized that there was always someone better than them out there. They had lost so decisively and so miserably. Everyone had to be responsible for their own decisions. They were the ones who had promised. If they wanted to go back on their word, they naturally had to pay the price. The fair-skinned young man gritted his teeth and said, "Just crawl out of the square, right?" Xiaoqing nodded. He took a deep breath and said, "Okay." Almost all of those people's legs were broken. When they crawled on the ground, they left a trail of blood one after another until they reached the edge of the square. Then they were picked up and taken away by others. The onlookers were silent. Probably they had never seen Xiaoqing's cruel means. Xiaoqing sneered and said, "Look at him. Makes me feel like I'm the bad guy. I'm the one who took someone else's house and asked them to crawl out." Yan Qiue said lightly, "The paranormal team these people belong to should belong to the kind with relatively high status in S-City survivor base. They are used to being arrogant and domineering. They can't see their own mistakes. No matter what happens, it must be someone else's fault." Yan Qiue's analysis hit the nail on the head. Xiaoqing looked at the bloodstains on the ground and walked back lazily. There was still a pot of soup on the stove. She didn't know whether Guchuan had brought it or not. She didn't add salt when she went out. The crowd couldn't see the excitement, and they were frightened by Xiaoqing's character. They gradually dispersed, but a few people didn't leave. Instead, they went to Xiaoqing and said, "Miss, please wait a moment." Xiaoqing looked at the person who called her. It was a beautiful woman with a gentle expression. She was followed by several paranormals. The woman was also a paranormal. She chuckled and said, "I want to talk business with you." Xiaoqing looked back at her and asked lazily, "What business?" When she said this, Xiaoqing was actually a little impatient. After so long, it was almost 10 o'clock, and her friend still hadn't eaten breakfast. Especially Yan Qiue. He was in poor health and had gastric problems. Although he rarely had gastric problems after Lin Mingya's medicinal diet, he still had to eat on time, or his stomach would still be damaged. What was more, Xiaoqing was still thinking about the pot of soup on the stove. She had been boiling it for the whole morning. If Lin Mingya forgot about it or finished it when they brought it down, it wouldn't taste good. The woman was very perceptive. Seeing that Xiaoqing was a little impatient, she hurriedly said, "It's like this. My young master wants to go to the forest to catch some high-level mutant animals. Previously, he hired a top-ranked team of paranormals in the base, but after they went a little deeper, they lost a lot of people and gave up the mission. I see that your team is full of elites. I don't know if you are interested in taking this mission? Of course, the reward is very generous. If you have any other requirements, you can also tell us. As long as it's not too excessive, we'll consider it." Wasn't it the task she had seen before? Xiaoqing touched her chin. In fact, she was quite interested in this task. Of course, she was interested in the forest. The forest was very vast, and there must be a lot of mutant animals and plants in it. Yan Qiyu would definitely like this forest very much, because in his eyes the whole forest was an experiment material. As for the other members of the team, this forest was also very good. Those high-level mutant animals and plants were very suitable for practicing. On the one hand, they could practice their skills. On the other hand, they could also get a high-level mutant animal's crystal nucleus and flesh. They could also find medicinal materials and mutant plants in the forest. If they only considered this mission was really suitable for them. However, Xiaoqing still had to consider more. The most important point was that they had just returned home. If they immediately rushed out, it would be too tiring. Xiaoqing didn't say perfunctorily. She said seriously, "I'll think about it. If you're still interested, you can go to the task hall. We've left some people there." The woman was very sensible and didn't disturb Xiaoqing anymore. Xiaoqing nodded and left with her friends. Her footsteps were very hurried. When she got home and saw the soup on the table, she breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it wasn't in vain. Chapter 256. After eating and drinking, Xiaoqing began to think about the task. She had her eyes on a few tasks, and it just so happened that their timings were together. If she accepted one task, she would easily miss the other one. The third task was okay. After all, cleaning up a city was a large-scale task. It would take a long time and require a lot of manpower. Especially the deeper she went, the more powerful the zombies she would encounter, and the slower the progress would be. In short, this task could be accepted at any time. The next task was the one she met today. Xiaoqing wanted to accept the task of escorting the researchers to the capital first. If the two tasks conflicted, she could only choose one of them. Xiaoqing thought a lot, and finally decided to go to the task hall. Didn't the woman say that they left some people in the task hall? Xiaoqing could go and ask. So after eating, Xiaoqing held the little bun's hand and took the 2 sticky candies that she couldn't tear off, and went to the task hall. The task hall was very lively today, and the number of people was more than half of the usual. Xiaoqing didn't think much about it. After squeezing in, she quickly saw the delicate girl standing under the task sign. The girl was holding a sign in her hand, and on the sign was the task of going deep into the forest. Xiaoqing walked over. "How long will this task last?" The girl was very serious. "It's like this. Because of the danger in the forest, we don't dare to go in. My master wants to gather more people and go in together. So the task will last until the end of the month. At the beginning of the next month, we will count the people who have accepted the task and choose some of them to go into the forest together. This way the safety factor will be higher." "Thank you." Xiaoqing nodded. It was easy to get the time. The distance from here to the capital was not far, and she didn't need to wait until the end of the month to go back and forth. She could accept the task first and then come back to accept this task. After thinking about it, Xiaoqing accepted the task first, and then reported it to the clerk in the hall. After recording it, she went to see the other task. At another mission point, it was already crowded with people. There was a long queue for registration. Xiaoqing frowned. She was almost pushed down by the crowd. Erdai helped her up. Meanwhile, Yan Qiyu found a young man and asked him, "Hey, what's going on?" The young man looked at Yan Qiyu and said, "Didn't you have a mission to escort an expert from the south to the capital? There were too many people who signed up, so the base chief issued an announcement saying that a portion of the people who signed up would be selected. Therefore, the base chief arranged some rewards, saying that those who were selected would receive a reward. In addition to the reward from the mission itself, it was very generous. Therefore, when the news came out, those who didn't sign up before came to sign up." Xiaoqing came to a sudden realization. There was a saying that went, "The world is bustling, and everyone comes for profit. The world is bustling, and everyone goes for profit." Wasn't this the most realistic portrayal? Xiaoqing, who originally wanted to sign up, gave up the idea. Now there should be enough people and she wouldn't be needed. She would just wait for the next task to start. Although she didn't sign up, Xiaoqing went to watch the competition on the day of the competition. Lin Xiaofeng, the captain of the Gale Paranormal team, and Cheng Jiao also participated. Base Chief Hao Yun even attended the competition in person, which showed that he attached great importance to this competition. Hao Yun was a rather young man. From his appearance, he seemed to be around 26 or 27 years old. Although he wasn't considered handsome, he was still considered delicate and pretty. Coupled with his gentle smile and extraordinary aura, he was still able to control the situation. Chapter 257. However, Xiaoqing had only watched half of the game. To be honest, after watching the friendly match in the capital, watching this was like watching a child's play. Xiaoqing was really not interested in watching anymore. After all, the friendly match in the capital had gathered all the top masters in the capital. It could be said that most of the best masters in the country were there. Naturally, it was not comparable to the S-City Survivor base. The strength of Lin Xiaofeng's team was not bad. This time they were definitely among the winners. Xiaoqing watched for a while then left. Instead of watching this here, it was better to go back and study what to eat at night and what soup to make next time. She had been making different kinds of soup, and so far she hadn't changed one. They were supposed to set off the next day, but because of some delays, the team that escorted the experts to the capital officially set off on the fourth day. Xiaoqing and the others rested in the base for about 10 days. Then, they were notified that the employer was going to choose someone. Not many people accepted this task. At least it was not as good as the task of escorting the experts, but there were still a lot of people. At least, when Xiaoqing and her friends arrived at the designated location, there were already a lot of people waiting there. The employer arrived right on time. He was followed by 2 paranormals. At first glance, Xiaoqing knew that the 2 paranormals were not weak. To her surprise, the employer was not old. He looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. His delicate little face still had a little baby fat. When he stood next to Gu Panpan, he was very suitable for the occasion. The boy stared with a pair of big black eyes, trying to make himself look more serious. However, the more serious he was, the cuter he looked. Xiaoqing didn't know a lot of people around, but there were some familiar faces. For example, a young man who had won 3 out of 5 games with her and left with a group of crippled people. Xiaoqing also learned his name today. He was called Cheng, and Chang'an's face turned green when he saw Xiaoqing. After all, he had been tortured badly by Xiaoqing and the others. Xiaoqing hadn't even made a move from the beginning to the end. The young man cleared his throat and said, "I need 2 teams of paranormals to protect my safety. Everyone present, who is more confident in their team, can take a step forward." When it came to confidence, Xiaoqing was more confident, so she took a step forward. As soon as Chang'an raised his foot, he saw Xiaoqing standing next to him. His expression became a little twisted, and he retracted his foot. He didn't want to be humiliated in front of everyone. Chang'an's team was ranked very high in the entire base. If he didn't move forward, the rest of the team wouldn't dare to move forward either. Thus, everyone looked at Xiaoqing strangely. Those who knew the inside story were secretly laughing. This time, Chang'an had been bitten once and was afraid of ropes for 10 years. Those who didn't know the inside story were also snickering. They were laughing at Xiaoqing and the others for being such country bumpkins. Chang'an hadn't even become a pervert yet, but this group of hotheads had already stepped forward. The young man glanced around and asked, "Don't you all have confidence?" Chang'an braced himself and took a step forward. The reward for this mission was very generous, and he didn't want to give up yet. Among the remaining people, those who didn't know the inside story also stepped forward one after another. After all, there were 2 spots. If they couldn't beat Chang'an, how could they lose to a group of country bumpkins? The young man nodded and said, "Those who don't have confidence can go back. Xiaofeng, give everyone 10 second-grade crystals as a reward for their hard work." His move could be considered generous. Those people took the reward and retreated to the side, but they didn't plan to leave. They still wanted to watch a good show. Chapter 258. The rest were those who were confident in themselves. The young man said with a serious face, I only need 2 teams of paranormals. That is to say, among you, there are still a few teams of paranormals who want to leave. I'll make it clear first because the forest is full of dangers. If you're too weak, you'll just be delivering yourself to death. Everyone should think twice before you act. However, the people who came here were not unreasonable. They must have done their research in advance and were confident in themselves. That was why they came here. After all, who would be willing to die for no reason? Since no one wanted to leave, the young man continued, you can use whatever means you have, whether it's persuasion or a one-on-one duel. The remaining 2 teams of ability users can take on this mission. As soon as his voice fell, everyone's eyes fell on Xiaoqing. After all, they had to pick the weakest one. In their hearts, Chang'an was the toughest one, so naturally they had to go around him. And Xiaoqing was undoubtedly the softest one. Then the softest persimmon in their hearts turned her eyes to Chang, and Xiaoqing smiled calmly, and her eyes looked very gentle. Do you want another one-on-one? Chang'an was very rational. I think we need to talk. You see, he needs 2 spots. So we don't have to kill each other at all. We can even work together, forget about our past differences and take these 2 spots. Those who wanted to watch a good show heard this and felt that something was wrong. What kind of temper did Chang'an have? How could he be soft to a nameless team? So when they looked at Xiaoqing and the others again, their eyes were full of inquiry and doubt. Xiaoqing thought about it seriously and finally said, I think instead of keeping a team of ability users who have a grudge against me and have to go deep into the dangerous forest with me, it's better to choose a team that is slightly weaker, but won't harm me behind my back. Chang'an was a sensible person. He immediately said, if during this mission I set a trap for you, or if our people set a trap for your people, then even if you want to kill someone, I will definitely not take revenge. Xiaoqing nodded with satisfaction and reached out her hand. Deal. Chang'an reached out his hand with a complicated look and shook Xiaoqing's hand. Deal. Once the 2 of them reached a consensus, they looked around. Chang'an said, is there anyone who wants to fight one-on-one? I'll take them all. Seeing that Chang'an and Xiaoqing had joined forces, the group of people immediately sighed. The reward for this mission was very generous, and they really didn't want to give it up. However, when they saw that the 2 teams of paranormals had formed an alliance, they knew that no matter which team joined forces, they would never be able to defeat Chang'an. Anyone with a brain would know that Xiaoqing's side was definitely not weaker than Chang'an's, because unless there were special circumstances, the strong would not cooperate with the weak on equal terms. Therefore, some people left. The remaining few were paranormals who knew their own strength. Xiaoqing glanced at Chang'an with a smile. Chang'an immediately understood that if he wanted to form an alliance with Xiaoqing, he had to at least show some sincerity. Therefore, he took a step forward and said to the remaining paranormals, time waits for no one. Let's not waste time. Come on, let's have a best of 3. Although the remaining paranormals were more confident in their own strength, there was still a very serious problem. That was, when they faced Chang'an's team, they could only be chopped up like vegetables. Therefore, the rest of them also left. There were only 2 paranormals left in the field, one on Chang'an's side, and the other on Xiaoqing's side. Xiaoqing was very satisfied. She didn't have to do anything. It saved time and effort. Chang'an was quite discerning. The young man waved his hand and asked his subordinates to send the remaining people away. Of course, he didn't forget to give everyone a little reward for their hard work. Then, he walked over and stretched out his hand with a serious face. My name is Qin Zishi. Please take care of me in the future. Xiaoqing and the others shook hands with him. After exchanging names, Qin Zishi said, does anyone have anything to pack? If you do, you can go pack now. We'll set off early tomorrow morning. After packing, if you're free, we can have a meal together. Xiaoqing rejected his good intentions and then went home with her friends. There were a lot of things to pack. She had to bring everything that she needed to bring. This time, Fu Jingma stayed behind to look after the house. After all, he was the only ordinary person in the entire paranormals team. The forest was more dangerous, so it wasn't suitable for him to follow. Therefore, he naturally stayed behind. Xiaoqing, on the other hand, packed up her things and prepared to leave with her friends. This time they would be gone for more than half a month. They still needed to bring some more important things, especially seasonings, kitchen utensils, tableware and fresh fruits and vegetables. These were indispensable. Xiaoqing emptied her space. Now 1/3 of the space was occupied by clothes, snacks, medicine and so on. 1/3 of the space was used to store crystals, and the remaining 1/3 was used to store these things. After packing their things and telling Fu Jingma, they were ready to set off. Chapter 259. Qin Zishi didn't bring many people with him. There were 2 paranormals and 2 girls. Including him, there were only 5 people. Then there were Xiaoqing's and Chang'an's squads. Overall, there were still a lot of people. The next morning, as soon as the gate of the base opened, they went out in a mighty manner. The vehicles were provided by Qin Zishi. There were a total of 5 cars with special drivers. When they reached the outside of the forest, they would leave the cars and enter the forest. The drivers would wait outside until they came out, then pick them up. They didn't talk much along the way. When they reached the forest, they had to leave the cars and walk into the forest. Only then did they have a short conversation. It was a very short conversation. They just arranged the formation for entering the forest. Chang'an's team was in charge of opening the way, Xiaoqing's team was in charge of the rear, and Qin Zishi was in the middle. It was relatively safe at the edge of the forest. The real danger would be revealed one by one when they went deep into the forest. During lunch, Xiaoqing saw someone who was even more awesome than her. One had to know that Xiaoqing always brought pots and pans with her when she went out. She even brought seasonings with her. This had already caused many people who knew her to complain about her. However, Qin Zishi brought a set of picnic equipment, including red wine, desserts, and fruits. It was extremely luxurious. The 2 girls on Qin Zishi's left and right were putting food in his bowl. The group of people was stunned. Qin Zishi brought a chef and a maid with him. Looking at Qin Zishi and Xiaoqing, they didn't think that Xiaoqing had brought pots and pans and a barbecue grill when she went out. After all, there was only harm when there was a comparison. After lunch, Qin Zishi called everyone over and said, "This time, I want to enter the forest to catch some high-level mutant animals. One thing is that I want them alive." As soon as he said that, Chang'an's face changed a little. After all, there was a big difference between catching a mutant animal alive and killing one. If the difficulty of killing a mutant animal was 1, then the difficulty of catching one alive was 10, and the casualties would be correspondingly higher. According to Qin Zishi, he didn't want ordinary low-level mutant animals, but at least level 3 ones. Everyone present was a level 3 paranormal. It was self-evident that it was difficult to catch a level 3 mutant animal alive. No wonder he offered such a high reward. It was said that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the sky. Even if there was a free lunch in the sky, the filling would be poisonous. Look, he was just smashing a bag on his head. So, Cheng's question was asked, why do you have to catch them alive? Although it is said that every part of a mutated animal is a treasure, the value of a living mutated animal and a dead mutated animal is not much different. On the contrary, the labor and casualties involved are simply not proportional to the cost. Qin Zishi hesitated for a moment, then said, "Since I've hired you, there are some things that I can't hide from you. The reason why I need live mutant animals is related to my special ability. My special ability is beast taming. As the name suggests, I can tame living mutant beasts. So, for me, only living mutant animals are valuable. That's why I need high-level mutant animals." He spoke from the bottom of his heart. Although Chang'an was still a little unwilling, he didn't say anything more. After all, he had chosen the task himself. At that time, Qin Zishi had made it clear that the difficulty of the task was proportional to the reward. Chapter 260. If he blamed the difficulty of the task, wouldn't it only mean that he was useless? On the other hand, Xiaoqing was calmer. She held the little bun in her arms and warmed the milk for him while asking, "Do you have any requirements for the species of mutant beasts? I'm a level 3 paranormal now. For me, level 3 mutant beasts are the most suitable. If they're too weak, they'll be useless. If they're too strong, I won't be able to control them. Besides, the number of mutant beasts I can tame is limited. My biggest goal this time is to find the most suitable mutant beast for me to fight with. Qin Zishi said with a serious face. I hope this mutant beast is a species with high fighting power, or has some special ability. The higher the fighting power, the better. Thank you for your help. We've been paid to do this. It's natural for us to work for you since we've been paid by you. Xiao Qing didn't ask for nothing. First, she had to choose one kind of mutant beast, and then avoid other dangerous ones as much as possible. She had to go straight to this one, which would be more efficient. She used to stay in the jungle for a long time, so she knew more about the habits of animals than ordinary people. After listening to Qin Zishi's request, she listed several mutant beasts. Among them, tigers and bears were the best choices, followed by leopards and pythons. If she couldn't find any of these four, she could only see if she could catch a few wolves. Among them, Xiao Qing thought the bear was the best choice. It could be said to be a combination of attack and defense. It could protect Qin Zishi well, and its fighting power was also very high. It was definitely the best choice for a paranormal with the ability to tame animals. Xiao Qing told Qin Zishi her idea, and the result was the same as Qin Zishi's. At first, he also thought that these were the best choices. If he could tame one of them and it was above level 3, this trip would be perfect. After all, mutant beasts were much stronger than paranormal at the same level. However, they didn't have the intelligence of human beings, so they were defeated by human beings. What if a high-level mutant beast was accompanied by a person who could command it? That would be a little scary. He would definitely be invincible among his peers. Unless he met a monster like Xiao Qing who didn't play by the rules. Therefore, Xiao Qing was very optimistic about Qin Zishi's future fighting ability. If Qin Zishi practiced some fighting skills to protect himself, then his fighting ability and threat would go up another level. After confirming the general goal, Qin Zishi demonstrated his beast-taming ability. From Qin Zishi's sleeve, a small emerald green snake suddenly crawled out. This small snake's scales were especially beautiful, just like pieces of jade. The thin scales clung tightly to its body, making its round little head look charmingly naive. As soon as the snake appeared, Yin Xiua almost couldn't control herself and used her superpower. Fortunately, Xiao Qing found out in time and held her down, so that Yin Xiua didn't lose her composure. Even so, Yin Xiua's forehead was still covered in a thin layer of sweat. This was not because he was afraid of snakes. After all, it was a snake that even dared to dissect people. It was because this snake was too poisonous. A drop of its venom could kill an elephant in an instant, let alone a human. Moreover, this snake had been mutated, so its venom should be even more terrible. Yin Xiua now admired Qin Zishi. He dared to raise such a poisonous snake. Wasn't he afraid of being bitten by it in the middle of the night? He wouldn't even know how he died. Qin Zishi wasn't afraid. He touched the little snake's head and said, Xiao Chui is the first mutant beast I've tamed since my beast-taming ability awakened. It's very obedient. You don't have to be afraid. Chapter 261. Even those who weren't afraid of the little snake peed their pants after listening to Yin Qiua's explanation. The bravest one wasn't Xiao Qing but Little Bun. He squatted down and patted Xiao Chui's head. Then he happily raised Yaya and said to Qin Zishi, I have one too. This is Yaya. It likes carrots. Qin Zishi blinked his big eyes. After a long time he couldn't help but reach out and pat Little Bun. Then, he shyly retracted his hand and said in a serious tone, Your Yaya is also very cute. Little Bun was immediately pleased. It was easy to please Little Bun. Either praise Xiao Qing or Yaya. Qin Zishi was exactly what he liked. Therefore, Little Bun took out a piece of milk candy from his little pouch and generously handed it to Qin Zishi. This is for you. Usually when this happened it meant that Little Bun was saying, With this piece of candy you'll be my friend. Qin Zishi didn't stand on ceremony with Little Bun. After receiving the candy he even gave Little Bun a pudding. That pudding was obviously his more precious stock. When he gave it away he felt a little heartache. Qin Zishi was still young and had a childish temperament. Little Bun didn't have a playmate since he was young, but he quickly became familiar with Qin Zishi. The two people, one snake and one rabbit, quickly left Xiaoqing and the others to play at the side. Xiaoqing felt a little helpless. Then she began to face some problems. For example, since the end of the world until now, because she was worried about little Bun, she had to bring him along with her every time she went on a mission. When she returned to the base, there was no one around the same age as her, so she hadn't made any friends. Xiao Tong didn't count. Xiaoqing had seen Xiao Tong and little Bun communicate. It was like a chicken talking to a duck, and the situation was very awkward. Of course, when they didn't communicate, they still got along very well. After all, when Xiaoqing wasn't around, Xiao Tong took care of little Bun. The two of them had a unique friendship. Qin Zishi was little Bun's first true friend. Thinking about it carefully, Xiaoqing felt quite ashamed. Why did the little Bun like Yiya so much? He hugged Yiya every day and was very close to her. It was all because he did not have any friends to play with, so Yiya automatically became the existence of his friends. Now that Qin Zishi was here, Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that not only did she have to pay attention to the little Bun's quality of life, she also had to pay attention to his psychological problems. Qin Zishi was a pretty good little boy. Although he deliberately pulled a long face every day to make himself look more serious, his puffy face only made him look cuter. More importantly, Qin Zishi liked the little Bun from the bottom of his heart. It could be seen from his actions that Qin Zishi doted on the little Bun. Therefore, little Bun was very happy. He finally had a playmate who could play with him. Moreover, his playmate also liked to raise small animals. Spicy little Cui played so well with Yiya. Yiya, whose rabbit legs were about to cramp after being frightened by the poisonous snake for an entire day, was speechless. Little master, with which eye did you see that I was playing well with it? Little Bun's happiness lasted for a long time. Even when Dai and Yin Chiue came over at night to snatch Mama away from him, it didn't change his good mood. Little Bun lay in Xiaoqing's arms while Yiya lay on the pillow and pretended to be dead. For the first time, little Bun didn't forcibly stuff Yiya between him and Xiaoqing. Instead, he wrapped his arms around Xiaoqing's neck and happily told Xiaoqing about what happened during the day. For example, Qin Zishi gave him delicious pudding and even lent him toys to play with. He even brought him to pick mushrooms. In short, Qin Zishi was a very good friend. Chapter 262. As he spoke, little Bun tilted his head and asked Xiaoqing, "Can we live with brother Xiaoxi in the future? I want to play with brother Xiaoxi." Xiaoqing patted little Bun's head and said gently, "No, only family members can live together. Qin Zishi has his family. After he finishes his business, he will leave. But if you like, I can bring you to play with him." Little Bun was a little disappointed. This was the first time he had met such a good friend, so he didn't want to be separated from him at all. He really wanted to sleep with him. But according to Mama, his friend would leave in the future. Why couldn't he be like Uncle Hanqing, like Dai, and live and sleep with them? Little Bun felt very troubled. He didn't want to be separated from his first friend. But Mama said that only family members could live together. Little Bun's head spun quickly. He bit his finger and twisted it in Xiaoqing's arms. Finally, he had a flash of inspiration. Wouldn't it be fine if he turned brother Xiaoxi into his family? Just like Dai and Yan Chiyue, who weren't his family in the past, weren't they sleeping with him now and even fighting over Mama with him? The more little Bun thought about it, the more he felt that his idea was feasible. In the end, he fell asleep in a daze. Before he fell asleep, his mind was still thinking about how he was hugging left and right. On the left was Mama, and on the right was his new friend Qin Zishi. In his arms was Yiya. Life couldn't be better. When they woke up the next morning, Xiaoqing first dragged Yiya out from under the bed, then called the three of them to brush their teeth and wash their faces. As a new good man, Yan Hanqing was already cooking breakfast. Breakfast needed to be light and nutritious. Yan Hanqing cooked porridge with vegetables and shredded pork, accompanied by stacks of salted vegetables, and a boiled egg for each of them. Life was still very good. The shredded salted vegetables were stir-fried by Yan Hanqing. He added vermicelli and shredded meat. Then he added peanut oil, stir-fried red chili, and added some fennel. Could be eaten directly as a dish. The aroma was so enticing that Chang'an couldn't help but ask for a plate. Little Bun and Qin Zishi were currently in the honeymoon period. Early in the morning, he hurriedly scooped porridge and shredded pickles, added 2 more eggs and sent it to Qin Zishi. When he came back he was all smiles. Even his dimples were showing. He was still holding the little doll that Qin Zishi had given him. Xiao Qing was quite happy to see that Little Bun had a playmate. Especially when she saw Little Bun's cute expression. She couldn't help but rub her son again. After breakfast, the group continued on their journey. Before they set off, Qin Zishi gave everyone a pack of insect repellent powder. This powder would drive away mosquitoes when applied on the body. It was quite useful in the forest. This was already their second day in the forest, and they had traveled a long way. They didn't know whether it was due to luck or something else, but they didn't encounter a single mutant beast along the way. They didn't even see common pheasants or rabbits. Qin Zishi was a little discouraged, but he quickly recovered. After all, the forest was very big and they were still at the edge. It was normal that they didn't encounter any animals. On the third day, they finally met their first mutant animal. It was a mutant wild cat. It was very fast, but it followed the habits of ordinary cats and ran away as soon as it saw people. However, they were still quite excited. At least they had begun to encounter mutant animals. When it was time to set off in the afternoon, Xiao Qing was the one who led the way. Gu Panpan walked in the front, followed by Xiao Qing. Dai and Gu Chuan were on the left and right respectively. Yan Hanqing and Gu Chuan were behind them. Xiao Tong was sandwiched between them. In this way, if Gu Panpan was in danger, Xiao Qing could react quickly and pull her back with the vines. Dai, who was good at close-range attacks, would fill in the gap. The rest were long-range attacks. As for Yan Qiue's position, it was all thanks to his shamelessness. Regarding this, Yan Qiue said that he would seize every opportunity to be with Xiao Qing at all times. After going deeper, Xiao Tong, who had the sharpest senses, sent a message that there was a strong presence ahead. Dai was also sensitive, so he quickly became alert. Xiao Qing trusted them very much, so she immediately signaled her friends to pay attention to the surroundings. She also became alert. After getting a little closer, Xiao Tong sent another message. There was more than one presence ahead, which meant there was more than one mutant animal ahead. Soon Xiao Qing could even feel the ground under her feet trembling slightly. That was to say, there was a mutant animal running in front of them. Moreover, the mutant animal was heavy, so the ground trembled when it ran. She jumped on a branch on one side, so her field of vision widened. After crossing countless branches, Xiao Qing could see clearly what was approaching them. The ones approaching were cows. Judging from their appearance, they looked a little like rhinoceroses, but their horns were smaller than rhinoceroses. Their overall size was also a little smaller than rhinoceroses. 3 to 5 of these cows were running wildly, with a few wolves chasing after them. Normally, there should be very few cows in this kind of forest. However, after the apocalypse, all kinds of animals left their original habitats and fled everywhere. Some mutated animals were not restricted to the environment, so it was not strange to meet any kind of animals in the forest. Perhaps they would meet fish running on the ground, or rabbits chasing tigers, such as Yi. Xiao Qing carefully looked at the wolves. Chapter 263. As the group of mutated animals approached, Xiao Qing remained motionless and carefully sensed their auras. In the end, she determined that these wolves were around level 3. If there was no better choice, these wolves could completely satisfy Qin Zishi's requirements. After confirming, Xiao Qing released the vines and called for the others to hide. The herd of cows seemed to have mad cow disease, running around wildly. What if they hurt someone? Dai was the fastest. He picked up Little Bun and ran up a tree. Then the others also hid. Only Chang'an's team was left standing there, confused. Little Bun quickly waved at Qin Zishi. Although Qin Zishi didn't understand what was going on, he followed his little friend when he saw him calling. Chang'an trusted Xiao Qing's abilities, so he also hid. The group of people hid in the trees and soon saw this scene. The cows were running wildly, and there was a lot of dust. The wolves were eating the dust and chasing after them. Shaoqing released the cows. The herd of cows looked quite pitiful. One of them had been almost killed, and there was still a bloody paw print on its butt. After the bull passed by, the vine suddenly drilled out of the ground like a giant net, trapping the wolves in the center. With her current strength, dealing with a few mutated beasts around level 3 was simply a piece of cake, a matter that was as easy as flipping her hand. There were sharp thorns on the vines. Once the vines caught the wolves, they quickly pierced their skin and injected poison. The wolves struggled for a while before they were completely paralyzed. They lay motionless in the net. Yin Qiue and the others were used to Shaoqing's strength. Although Chang'an knew that Shaoqing could lead someone like Gu Panpan, this was the first time he saw Shaoqing's abilities. He couldn't help but walk over and poke the wolves in the net. He asked his question, "Are these level 3 mutated wolves?" Looking at their greenish-black fur and the green lightning mark on their foreheads that resembled Erlang Shan's, one could tell that they should be wind-type mutated wolves. But how could a level 3 mutated wolf not even put up a fight before being wiped out in one go? It was literally catch them all in one fell swoop. Shaoqing nodded and retracted the vines, leaving behind the 3 green wolves that were still twitching on the ground. She then said, 2 beginner level 3 and 1 mid-level 3. Their potential is not bad. At the very least, they won't have a problem growing to level 4. I've temporarily paralyzed them. Do you want to find a place to lock them up first? Qin Zishi was also a little stunned. How long had it been since they entered the forest? They only managed to capture 3 mutated beasts, and they were wolves with relatively high combat power among mutated beasts. More importantly, they didn't suffer any casualties, and they didn't even need to do anything. The little bun imitated Qin Zishi's serious expression and rode on Air Dai's neck. He reached out his little paw and stroked Qin Zishi's hair. Then he said, "They look fierce. They're not as cute as Xiao Chui. Do you want to keep them?" Qin Zishi nodded and waved at a beautiful girl beside her with an adorable look. The girl took out an iron cage out of thin air, and the other 2 paranormals moved the 3 wolves into the cage. Shaoqing looked at Qin Zishi with a slightly deeper gaze. There were very few space paranormals. Because they didn't have the ability to protect themselves, many of them died in the early days of the apocalypse. The surviving space paranormals were in an awkward position in the base. Usually, when a powerful mercenary group went out on a mission, they would bring along a space paranormal. Chapter 264. After all, they had to find a place to store the materials they had plundered from the outside, as well as the things they had brought out. However, if the person with the ability to use space wasn't a close relative of the captain, it was inevitable that they would be suspected of embezzling the materials and the like. Therefore, paranormals with space were in an awkward position after the apocalypse. They were indispensable, but they were also suspected. However, Qin Zishi brought a paranormal with him when he went out, which was really bad. Besides, judging from the size of the cage, the paranormal space should be quite big. After all, he couldn't have brought only one cage with him. In addition to the cage, there should be many other things in his space. However, Shaoqing just glanced at Qin Zishi. After catching the wolves, they had to set up camp on the spot. Even a paranormal with space power couldn't store living things in his space. They couldn't drag such a big cage forward, right? Therefore, Qin Zishi wanted to try to subdue the wolves. As long as he could subdue them, the wolves would listen to his orders. They wouldn't be a burden, and could even be helpful in the following journey. Therefore, they could only rest on the spot. They couldn't move forward until Qin Zishi subdued the wolves. Qin Zishi's power was very rare. At least, Shaoqing hadn't seen another paranormal like him. During the process of setting up camp, Shaoqing didn't stay on the spot. Instead, she carried the little bun and walked forward. Originally, they were going for a walk. Yaya had been trained to be very fierce. When it encountered small mutant animals, as long as the little bun gave the order, it would rush out. It didn't look like a rabbit at all, but more like a dog pouncing on its prey. After walking for a short distance, Shaoqing saw a small lake. It was more like a puddle than a lake. There might have been a fountain here a long time ago, and a lot of water gushed out from the ground. Later, the fountain was no longer active, but the puddle remained. The puddle was not small. Xiaoqing tried it and found that it was half a person's height. The water was very clear, and she could see the soil and gravel at the bottom. There were no creatures in the water, only a few aquatic plants. Thus Xiaoqing was moved. She bit her fingertips and teased the surface of the water. She really wanted to go down and take a bath. After entering the forest, she had not taken a bath, so it was no wonder that when she looked at the pool of water, she was extremely moved. Xiaoqing thought about it carefully. There should be no one around except for the group of people, so as long as there was someone to keep watch, it would be relatively safe to take a bath. Thus Xiaoqing gladly requisitioned Yaya. She threw Yaya out, then took out a carrot from her space and gave it to Yaya. If anyone comes near, remind me. Chapter 265. Xiaoqing glanced at him, then turned her face away seriously. But when she turned away, she glanced at him again. At this moment, Yin Qiuyue was already taking off his pants. He bent down to tug at the bottom of his pants. The white underwear wrapped around his buttocks, and because he bent down, a little of his groin was exposed. It was very erotic. Xiaoqing instantly became very serious. She turned her head and said, "Go ahead and shower. I'll be your lookout." Then she walked away. Yin Qiuyue was a little disappointed. Actually, he didn't want to shower. His original intention was to seduce Xiaoqing. However, when the little bun was around, Xiaoqing was too difficult to seduce. Thus, Yin Qiuyue hurriedly showered and got up. He put on his clothes, turned around a tall and strong tree, and saw Xiaoqing squatting on the ground and bullying Yaya. Poor Yaya. She was being bullied to the point of crying. Yin Qiuyue suddenly wanted to hug Xiaoqing from behind. He wanted to hug her slender waist and feel her slightly cold body temperature. Sometimes Yin Qiuyue would also think, how did he fall in love with her? He was clearly such a selfish and heartless person. He could even be so ruthless to himself. How could he fall in love with a woman so wholeheartedly? Was it because she didn't discriminate against his special interests? Was it because of the gentleness under her indifferent mask when she faced him? It was both, but it wasn't. For some people it was fate and also calamity. The moment he saw her, he gave his heart to her. Even someone like him couldn't escape from it. It was just that she was too good, so she attracted the attention of too many people. From Erdai to Yan Hanqing to Guchuan and even Fu Jingma, Yin Qiuyue couldn't help but bite his fingertips. His eyes were a little red. God knew how much he wanted to kill all those who tried to get close to Xiaoqing. However, his rationality told him that he couldn't do that. The two thoughts crushed each other. Yin Qiuyue felt that he had already gone crazy. Perhaps love had this kind of magic that made him willing to suppress himself and do things for her that he would never do in the past. Unknowingly, Yin Qiuyue had bitten his fingertips until they were badly mangled. He quietly hid his fingertips, suppressed all the crazy thoughts in his heart, and leaned over. "Ah Qing, why don't we have roast rabbit tonight?" Yaya widened her eyes and looked at Yin Qiuyue. Demon. Bastard. It actually instigated its master's mama to get rid of it. Xiaoqing picked up the rabbit's tail and said affectionately, "Since it's so useless, I'll eat it." Yaya immediately curled up into a ball and whimpered while acting cute and pitiful to her master, begging for help. Little Bun pinched the rabbit's ears and said, "Mama, don't scare Yaya anymore. Look, it already knows its mistake." Yaya immediately hugged her paws and bowed pitifully and comically. Only then did Xiaoqing let her go and said, "Since we're all out, let's hunt some prey back and make dinner." Yin Qiuyue couldn't wait to spend more time with Xiaoqing, so he naturally wouldn't refuse. He pointed in a direction and said, "Let's go over there? The grass over there seems to be more lush." Xiaoqing nodded and led the two people and one rabbit over. They caught a lot of small prey back and threw them to the chef, Yan Hanqing, to handle. Unexpectedly, they also found a kind of walnut in the forest. However, after opening the shell, they found small black seeds that could be used as seasoning. Xiaoqing specially collected a lot of them to see if they could grow them when they went back. That way they wouldn't have to worry about seasoning anymore. When it came to cooking, they ate separately. Yan Hanqing and the others had a portion, while Erdai, Xiaoqing, and Little Bun had a separate portion. This was the food that Yan Qiyue made after working tirelessly on it. It was food that could be digested by zombies. Although Xiaoqing could still only eat a small amount of food, she was very satisfied. More importantly, when there were so many people like Chang'an and the others, Xiaoqing wouldn't be easily exposed. Of course, what made Xiaoqing most satisfied was that she could eat now. She didn't have to watch others eat and then vomit. After all, Xiaoqing was still a normal person psychologically. She really couldn't accept a life of fasting. Especially if she didn't eat for a long time, she would feel that she was mentally abnormal. Yan Qiyue's research was successful in a timely manner. He actually made a kind of medicinal powder. The main ingredients were the nuclei and bones of mutated animals, as well as some special mutated plants. Then, when cooking, the powder would be mixed in. It would allow zombies to digest most of the food in their stomachs. The small portion that couldn't be digested would still need to be vomited out. While Yan Hanqing was processing the ingredients, Little Bun had already run to see his little friend. His little friend was still communicating with Green Wolf. His superpower seemed to be very powerful, as he could control more than one high-level mutated animal. However, the process of making it comfortable was very troublesome. Speaking of which, his superpower was also a spiritual power. The main thing was that he could communicate with mutated animals, and use his spiritual power to leave a mark in their minds. Only then could he control them. Therefore, during the process of taming mutated animals, Qin Zishi faced a certain degree of danger. For example, if the mutated animal's spiritual power was very high, it would oppress his spiritual power and damage it. If it was serious, he might even become an idiot or directly die. The second thing was that all mutated animals were very wild and aggressive. He needed to be very close to them in order to communicate with them. Then, during the process of communication, he would constantly use his spiritual power to stimulate and conquer them. In the end, he would be able to tame them. In short, strong power was always accompanied by high risks. Chapter 266. Xiao Chui was a very poisonous creature, but it was only level 2, so Qin Zishi was not very tired when he subdued it. But now, there were 3 mutated wolves in front of him, and each of them was at the same level as him. One could imagine the difficulty of subduing them. Qin Zishi started subduing a level 3 mutated wolf. This mutated wolf had been struggling, and its mental strength had not stopped for a moment. Qin Zishi struggled for a few hours, and his forehead was covered in sweat, but there was still no progress. He could not help but feel a little disappointed. In theory, he could subdue level 3 mutated animals, but why was there no progress at all? Young master is busy. You can't disturb him. A woman's gentle voice came from outside the door, and Little Bun's timid voice said, "Can't I play with Brother Xiaoxi? I won't make trouble." Qin Zishi rubbed his head and said, "Come in." He did not have any younger siblings since he was young, and Little Bun was very cute, so he especially liked Little Bun and doted on him like a younger brother. Little Bun ran in happily, and then saw a big wolf lying in front of Qin Zishi. Its claws were tied up, but it still looked very fierce. Little Bun sat obediently at the side, and then said softly, "I won't disturb Brother Xiaoxi." "Brother, are you going to raise this ugly wolf in the future?" Qin Zishi tried his best to make his face look more serious, then patted Little Bun's head and said, "Yes, brother will raise them in the future." "Spicy, is it disobedient?" Little Bun looked at the ropes on the wolf, then wrinkled his little nose and said fiercely, "Mama, shrink the Spicy. If it's disobedient, beat it. If it's obedient, Spicy." Yaya was disobedient at that time, and then she was beaten up by Xiaoqing. Now she was very obedient. Qin Zishi laughed and did not take Little Bun's words seriously. He moved a small stool for him to sit at the side, and then continued to study. They could not stay here forever. He had to subdue these wolves as soon as possible and leave this lousy place. When Qin Zishi started communicating with the wolf using her spiritual power again, The little bun hugged Yaya and looked at the big wolf obediently. The wolf was extremely ferocious. It bared its white teeth and saliva continuously flowed out of its mouth. Its mental strength fluctuated violently. Little Bun immediately glared at the wolf. His black eyes seemed to have no white in them as he stared at the wolf. A ferocious aura exploded from Little Bun's body. Qin Zishi originally thought that the wolf's mental strength was like a thick barrier, preventing his mental strength from going any further. But suddenly the barrier disappeared, and his mental strength went deep into the wolf's mental strength without any hindrance, leaving a simple imprint. Qin Zishi was stunned. He had been grinding for hours without any progress. How did he suddenly succeed? No matter what, this was a good thing. Qin Zishi opened his eyes and tried to send out an order. The wolf immediately lay on the ground and wagged its tail obediently. Qin Zishi heaved a sigh of relief. It was not a dream. He had really subdued it. In Qin Zishi's eyes, Little Bun was a lucky star. He succeeded as soon as Little Bun came, so Qin Zishi did not say anything and hugged Little Bun and kissed him. Little Bun was very shy, then pouted and kissed back. He said shyly, "Brother Shaoxi, are you spicy after you finish your business?" Qin Zishi patted his head. "Brother will play with you first." Chapter 267. Things were progressing smoothly here, and Shaoqing had also successfully broken through to the pinnacle of level 4. Although it was called a breakthrough, it was actually a matter of accumulating a lot of energy. Now she only needed a catalyst to break through to level 5. Shaoqing originally thought that Qin Zishi would need at least 3 days to tame the 3 wolves, but he took less than a day. The next morning, he led the 3 wolves out in high spirits. "I've named them Little 1, Little 2, and Little 3. Qin Zishi patted the wolf with the highest level, then asked Little Bun gently, "Do you want to try riding it?" Little Bun happily rode on the wolf. Shaoqing couldn't help but sigh. Little Bun really forgot about his mother when he had a companion. Since Qin Zishi had already tamed the wolves, they continued moving forward. Actually, Qin Zishi was already satisfied with this trip, but since they were already here, it would be a pity to go back like this. What if they found a higher-level mutated animal that was more suitable for him? The wolf called Little One almost became Little Bun's personal mount. Little Bun was very happy sitting on it. Even Yaya, who had felt weak in the knees when she saw the big wolves, stood on the wolf's head valiantly. The group continued moving forward. After going deep into the forest for a certain distance, danger was everywhere, and the group became more and more vigilant. Shaoqing was aiming for places where bears lived. According to the habits of bears, they looked for places where bears might live. They did indeed find a few bears, but unfortunately, the highest level was only level 2. Their combat power was a little low, and they were not suitable for Qin Zishi at all. Then for a few days they didn't find anything. On this day it suddenly rained. The rain wasn't light. At first it was just dripping rain. Raindrops fell through the gaps between the branches and leaves, hitting Shaoqing's face. She raised her head, and within a few seconds, she felt the coldness of the rain. The rain tonight might be so heavy that they couldn't see if there were any beasts nearby. After all, the sound of the rain would cover a lot of other sounds. Shaoqing and the others had no choice but to set up tents on the spot to shelter themselves from the wind and rain, and to keep warm. In short, there was no way to continue moving forward this afternoon. Probably because of the rain, the sky was completely dark around 4:30 in the afternoon. Dark clouds covered the earth. The clouds were like a black curtain, covering their faces. The weather in the post-apocalyptic world had always been strange. One second it was raining, and the next second the rain was mixed with hail. Shaoqing had to use vines to cover their tent to prevent the hail or rain from collapsing the tent. Another more painful thing was that they could no longer sleep in their sleeping bags, or else they might become water bags. Shaoqing could only hold the Little Bun in her arms and let him continue sleeping. The rain didn't stop for the whole night. It wasn't until 10 o'clock the next day that the weather slowly cleared up. When Shaoqing lifted up the tent, she was stunned. The weeds on the ground were all blooming with small white flowers that spread far and wide. It was exceptionally beautiful. Because the ground was very wet, the soles of their feet were muddy when they stepped on it. Xiaoqing was still walking happily, especially when she saw those busy bees. Bees collected honey, and bears liked to steal honey. If they found a beehive, then if they were lucky, they might meet a bear. Because of the heavy rain, many snakes and insects were flushed out of their nests and laid across the road, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Even a huge python was flushed out of a cave and curled up on the ground. Xiaoqing and the others didn't want to cause trouble, so they went around it. Chapter 268. Following the direction where the bees were flying, she could find the beehive. Then Xiaoqing discovered that it was the same kind of tree. On the branches there were beehives. Due to the large number of beehives, they looked like fruits hanging from the tree. Then Xiaoqing did something bad. She secretly plucked a beehive and smashed it to get a lot of honey, filling a small bottle full of honey. Dai almost got a bump on his head because of this. Xiaoqing and the others stayed nearby for the time being, waiting for bears to come and steal the honey so that they could catch them directly. Although this was a bit like waiting for rabbits to appear, it was already a very irrational choice to continue going deeper. No one knew what was in the depths of the forest. Instead of taking the risk, it was better to wait for a while. It would be best if they could catch a mutant bear. But if they couldn't, they could just leave the forest. Anyway, Qin Zixi harvest this time was enough to satisfy him. Xiaoqing even planned to pluck all the beehives and drink the honey when they left, regardless of whether they could catch a bear or not. As expected, they didn't meet a bear. Instead, they met some small mutant animals. Although Qin Zixi was a little unwilling, they still had to return. 3 wolves opened up the path. Their auras were extremely fierce and were best used to open up a path. Usually, mutant animals with some brains wouldn't provoke them. Those without brains were usually weaker and didn't dare to provoke the powerful wolves. Little Bun rode on the wolf and had a lot of fun. There was a saying that went, "An unintentional willow grows a shade." They sincerely wanted to find a high-level mutant bear. But they didn't find one and had already given up. When they were about to return, they met a bear. The situation at the time was like this. Because it had been raining for several days, the ground was wet. Basically, after an entire day, the soles of their shoes could be covered with more than 10 centimeters of soil. Little Bun carried a jar of honey and rode on the wolf with Yaya, followed by Xiaoqing. When they stopped for lunch at noon, Little Bun put the honey on the ground, but when he came back after lunch, where did the honey go? The jar full of honey was almost empty. Little Bowsy was more stubborn. He grabbed the person and asked, "Did you steal my honey?" Little Bun felt a little wrong that he couldn't find an answer after asking around. Then he blinked and saw a tail peeking out from behind the tree. The round bulbous tail looked very cute. Little Bun couldn't help but pull it. Felt very good to the touch. Then he pulled the bear out from behind the tree. The bear was sleeping soundly after eating, waiting for you. But its tail was almost pulled off by someone. It howled and poked its head out from behind the tree, wanting to see who had the guts to pull its tail. Then she saw the Little Bun. Little Bun was also dumbfounded. He had only seen a cute, soft gray ball, and then he had grabbed a big black bear. The contrast was too great. Little Bun cried out and almost cried. On the other hand, Yaya was very loyal. Her first reaction was to jump up and kick the bear's face. The bear was caught off guard and was kicked to the ground by a rabbit. The sound of the bear landing was very loud and immediately attracted Xiaoqing's attention. When Xiaoqing saw this scene, she was scared out of her wits. Her little baby was sitting in front of the bear, looking at the big bear pitifully. Xiaoqing ran over without a word. She picked up the Little Bun and heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 269. The bear was actually very innocent. After it ate the honey, it was so satisfied that it wanted to find a place to take a nap. It wanted to see if another jar of honey would appear in front of it when it woke up. Then its tail was pulled. The bear was in so much pain that it cried out and woke up. Before it could see clearly who pulled its tail, it was kicked to the ground by a rabbit. There were so many twists and turns. After Xiaoqing picked up the little bun, she released the vines. This time she couldn't trap the bear. The bear's fur was very thick. The thorns couldn't pierce through it at all, let alone inject the poison. More importantly, the bear was very strong. It stood up and the vines tied to its body broke one after another. The vines were very strong. Xiaoqing had used them to trap countless zombies and mutated animals, but the bear broke them easily. Fortunately, they were made of energy and wouldn't be damaged. Otherwise, Xiaoqing's heart would ache. Xiaoqing's heart was full of the little bun. She was worried that the little bun was hurt. In her anxiety, she took out a green fruit from her space and stuffed it into the bear's mouth. The bear was looking around slowly when the fruit filled its mouth. It chewed slowly. It tasted sour and a little sweet. Then it collapsed. Xiaoqing wasn't in the mood to care about it. She quickly checked the little bun's body to see if he was hurt. She checked inside and out several times. When she didn't find any injuries, she heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, Xiaoqing finally reacted. Wasn't there a bear just now? The bear lying on the ground. She didn't know what she had stuffed into the bear's mouth. The bear was lying on the ground, looking like it was asleep. Xiaoqing touched the bear's head. When she didn't see any reaction, she grabbed the bear's paw and dragged it back. The people who were cooking and waiting for their food. I went out for a stroll and actually brought back a bear. Xiaoqing's expression was also a little strange. She felt that Qin Zixi life was really too good. He had always wanted a bear with thick skin that could be used as a meat shield. Then, when they were about to leave the forest, a bear delivered itself to their doorstep. Was Qin Zixi really not God's illegitimate child? Peak level 3. Do you want to subdue it? Xiaoqing asked with a strange expression. Qin Zixi's expression was also a little sluggish. After a while he said, okay. However, there was no need to rush to tame the bear. They had to eat first. After the meal, Qin Zixi turned around to take a look. Her face was about to crack. The bear had been sleeping on the ground, but now its aura had suddenly become unstable. There was also a thick earthy yellow light shining continuously. It was clearly about to break through. Who had seen a captive about to break through at such a critical moment? Not only Qin Zixi but even Xiaoqing felt that Qin Zixi was really lucky this time. Once this bear broke through, it would become a level 4 mutated animal. With the strength of a level 4 mutated bear and Qin Zixi's intelligence, it would be almost invincible among those of the same level. Even someone like Xiaoqing, who was at the peak of level 4, wouldn't dare to face Qin Zixi directly. Xiaoqing was silent for a long time. Then she said, hurry up and subdue it. When it evolves to level 4 and wakes up, it will be very difficult for you to subdue it again. Qin Zixi knew that now wasn't the time to be polite, so he took the bear back. Thus they could only set up camp. As soon as Xiaoqing returned to the tent, she immediately took out a green fruit from her space. This fruit was the one she had stuffed into the bear's mouth before. This was an unexpected harvest from the last time they were in the forest. She had kept both the vine and the fruit. Later on, some things happened that caused her to forget about this fruit. If it weren't for the fact that she had stuffed one into the bear's mouth, Xiaoqing would have completely forgotten about it. Was the bear's evolution related to this fruit? Xiaoqing called Yan Qiyue over to let a professional check if this green fruit was poisonous. After a careful examination, Yan Qiyue found that not only was the fruit not poisonous, but it also contained rich energy. Without hesitation, Xiaoqing called Air Dai over and stuffed one into his mouth. Air Dai was the weakest among them now. Although Air Dai couldn't speak, Xiaoqing could feel that Air Dai was sullen, which was why she had thought of giving the fruit to Air Dai first. Xiaoqing was worried that the whole fruit was too strong, and that it might have side effects, so she first cut the skin of the fruit and squeezed out the juice. She diluted it with water and gave it to Air Dai to drink. If Xiaoqing gave Dummy something, even if it was poison, he would drink it. After Dummy drank a cup of diluted juice, his eyes brightened. A feeling of being close to a breakthrough broke out from his body. Dummy should have used the energy accumulated for a long time to fill the crystal nucleus, so that he could proceed to the next step of the breakthrough. However, Dummy broke through just like that. He licked his lips, still wanting more. This breakthrough was too easy, and he didn't feel tired like he usually did. He just stared blankly for a while and then broke through. Xiaoqing didn't say anything and gave him a few more cups of juice. However, the effect of the second cup wasn't as good as the first. After Air Dai drank the juice from the whole fruit, he broke through to the mid-stage of level 3. But this was already very scary. If it weren't for this fruit, he might have needed a few months to reach his current level. Yan Qiyu watched the whole process. Then he asked quietly, "How many of these fruits are left?" Xiaoqing counted and said with a pained expression, "One was eaten by the bear, and one was eaten by Air Dai. Now there are 4 left." If she had known that the fruit was so effective, she wouldn't have given it to the bear. At that time she was muddle-headed. She was afraid that the bear would bite little Bun, so she casually took out something to bet on its mouth. Yan Qiyu had a headache. How should he divide the 4 fruits? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.